All right, and we're live. Welcome to HSD, a place to critically think. And
What's poppin', guys?
you said, "What's poppin'?" Let's see if that came through. Say something else, Chatty. Let's just see if it's. Let's see what.
Something else. Blah blah blah.
Okay,
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
the audio's definitely working.
it is working on your stream. That's crazy.
Okay, so that's good.
You must have done something to fix it from all the other times that it was broken.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah. Just give me one sec, real quick. I'm just going to show this link out, and then we're gonna get started. So for the audience and everyone that's here today, essentially what we're going to be talking about is Cosmic Skeptic. We're going to be responding to him talking with what's his name, Peter Singer. He is a famous philosopher who's definitely helped promote veganism quite a bit. He's written a book called Animal Liberation, and he had a discussion with Cosmic Skeptic. And like a lot of things that Cosmic Skeptic has said regarding, I'm assuming this includes animal ethics. This discussion, correct? Like just the little bits I've seen.
Certainly they talk about it in this. I
Yeah.
haven't watched it. I just watched Joey Carpstrong.
Well, yeah. I saw a little bit of that. So, like, I'm assuming, like, Cosmic Skeptic has once again said a lot of inflammatory things. And apparently he destroyed utilitarianism, and we'll be finding out just how badly. At least according to Chaddie.
Yeah, well, that if you watch Joey Carpstrong's video, that's what he said. Cosmic Skeptic destroys utilitarianism. These utilitarians and their calculations.
Wait a second. Even though it's live, I'm not sure if this is this public. Okay, yeah, it's public. It's visibility.
I know it's public because I got to it just from your YouTube channel.
Okay, so basically, if it doesn't load on Discord, the icon, so you can stream privately on StreamYard, which I don't even understand how the fuck that makes sense. But you know what? Basically, so if you stream privately on StreamYard, what'll end up happening is you're gonna waste a whole lot of goddamn time doing a whole lot of goddamn nothing, and
Yeah,
it's pretty sad.
It's definitely public because I'm on your YouTube channel right now and seeing it. All right, well, go.
Just one sec. I'm almost done. I'm just gonna share this one more time. Animal.
These utilitarians and calculators and God, mathematics in general. I hate math.
All right. What the? Okay, so yeah, we're gonna get going here.
X, Y, and their Z and omega theta, and I can solve ethical problems.
All right.
God, I hate utilitarians.
I think, Chatty, before we get into this, why don't you just state your normative framework?
I'm a utilitarian.
Yeah, so I would say that I lean towards virtue ethics, but I'm more than a virtue ethicist. I guess my particular philosophy is that you should encompass. It's good to value different ethical systems. I'm like when it comes to like I lean towards virtue ethicist. However, I do include other things in my normative ethics, such as valuing rights and utility. So I'm not purely dedicated towards virtue itself. I mean, like anyone can choose anything and just say it's virtuous. Hell, someone could say murder is virtuous. Like what we perceive to be as virtuous.
Bad guys.
Yeah, but somebody could perceive like really ridiculous things as virtuous. Like someone could say, I think X is virtuous for just no other reason other than but then again, like I'm not really well read in virtue ethics, so with that being said, we will get started on the video. Okay, here we go. Here we go.
I want the abolition of animal exploitation, full stop. 2, I would love to see that happen, but I don't see a way of making that happen within the foreseeable future.
Like, I need to buy a razor in order to shave my face. And in theory, like, my facial hair could never be as important as the life of a suffering child somewhere across the globe. I wonder what you think about that, and whether you think on a utilitarian basis, if somebody is intentionally eating a caloric surplus, is that an unethical thing to do? Welcome to Within Reason. My name is Alex O'Connor, and my guest today is Peter Singer. Peter Singer is an Australian moral philosopher and is famed for being perhaps the most important contributor to the field of practical ethics in living memory, with works such as Famine, Affluence and Morality in 1972, Animal Liberation in 1975, Practical Ethics in 1979, and The Life You Can Save in 2009. Peter Singer is often credited with putting animal ethics on the map with Animal Liberation, and that's a book that he's reissuing as Animal Liberation Now, and that's a book you can pre-order by using the links available in the description. And this episode of Within Reason is brought to you by Blinkist. The Blinkist app allows you to understand the most important things from over 5,500 books and podcasts, each in around 15 minutes. You can become more articulate, more knowledgeable about world events and history, a better communicator. Much of the wisdom required for doing such things can be found in books. But we're busy people, and we don't always have time to read all of the books that we would like to. That's where Blinkist can help. For example, one of Peter Singer's books, The Life You Can Save, is available on Blinkist. And all I have to do is tap on Read Links, and up comes the most important insights of all. You can get 30% off a premium membership plan, which remember you can then share for free with a friend by using my link, blinkist.com/Cosmic Skeptic, or by clicking the link down in the description. With that said, I hope you enjoyed the following conversation with Peter Singer. Peter Singer, thank you so much for being here.
I'm very happy to be with you, Alex.
I'm looking forward to talking today at your reissuing Animal Liberation, which many people see as one of the most, if not the most important work in the history, or at least the recent history of animal ethics. First published in 1979, and then I think reissued in 95. I've had a chance to read through the revised edition, Animal Liberation Now, and I noticed that a few things have changed. In the introductory chapter, putting forward the ethical case for our moral consideration of animals, I noticed that some arguments have been adapted, some redacted entirely, it seemed. I wondered, what is it that made you feel now was the time to update this volume?
Well, in fact, it hadn't been updated since 1990. I think the 95 reissue was something that came out with a new preface, maybe, but the text itself was written before 1990. So if you looked at, for example, the experiments I describe in the chapter on experiments on animals, they would all be from 1989 or earlier. And clearly, 33 years after that, that's becoming a bit irrelevant if somebody wants to say, well, are we still doing bad things to animals in labs? And the same is true, perhaps in some more subtle changes with factory farming, that things have moved on, in some cases slightly for the better, in some cases definitely for the worse. And so it's no good talking to people about how animals were treated in factory farms in 1989 or earlier. That's not really relevant. So I wanted to bring that up today. Plus, there has been quite a lot of philosophical discussion about a range of issues. I wanted to say something about those discussions, new topics, new fields that have been raised, like the suffering of wild animals, I wanted to comment on. And finally, a lot of people ask me, well, has there been progress since the original edition of Animal Liberation came out? What do you feel? Do you think you've achieved something? And that's a bit of a complex story, but I did want to say something about what has happened and what has not happened during that period.
So what has changed since 1975 in terms of our treatment of animals and experimentation and animal farming that's sort of morally significant for you?
Well, let's take the use of animals raised for food. So,
Chaddie, I'm curious, what is your opinion on the book Animal Liberation? By the way, you're muted, so unmute.
Yeah, I know. I never really read it. I read the beginning of it, but I mean, he wasn't that where he came up with the marginal cases argument, or he publicized it, or am I wrong about that? I never actually read the book.
I marginal case. I don't know. I thought you said you read a little bit of it.
Yeah, I read the beginning of it. Maybe that was actually in there. And I don't.
What was your impression reading the beginning of it for the audience?
It seemed like a reasonable book, right? In terms of apparently it's what made Alex O'Connor go vegan. I guess he switched back though, but.
Do you think Animal Liberations for Peter Singer was more or less his statement on liberation? Because he's sort of updating it rather than creating a sequel.
I don't know if I know what you mean. Obviously, it's his statement, right?
Yeah, but it's a statement that's updating rather than something that needs a sequel. It's an updating statement rather than something needing a sequel. Did it you only read the very beginning, but we'll just continue. There's not much to say on that.
Well, I
So
do want to read
farmed
this new version. Maybe I'll pirate that somehow.
No, you won't. You'll never admit. You quote unquote did not admit. You quote unquote were just joking when you said that, right? You were
Yeah,
joking,
of
right?
course, joking. I would never. Maybe. Well,
I-
obviously, I'd never commit piracy. That's wrong.
Yes,
Obviously.
and obviously you would never say that on my channel, correct?
Yeah, of course not. Of
With
course not.
with censorship overlords looking over us.
Yeah, of course not.
Okay, let's
Piracy is
continue.
evil.
Let's continue. Yeah, do everything the state says.
Animals, because that's by far the biggest area in terms of the numbers of animals we raise for food. It's absolutely vast, including fish factory farms, so-called aquaculture. We're probably around 200 billion animals being produced each year, raised and killed each year, and that dwarfs the number of animals used in experiments, which is probably around 200 million. So that's 1,000 times more we're talking about in animals raised for food. And that's one of the biggest things that has happened, that has expanded, and it's expanded to a considerable degree because a number of other countries where there was no factory farming and where there was relatively little consumption of animal products, largely because of poverty, have now greatly expanded their animal production. And so China is the obvious example. There are tens of billions of animals in factory farms in China who were not there when I first wrote the book. And the conditions are pretty terrible. So that's the bad news. The good news, I think, is that some progress has been made in some countries, and I would say especially in the countries that make up the European Union. And I would include the United Kingdom, although it's no longer part of the European Union, but generally they have maintained the laws about raising animals that existed when they were in the European Union. So they're positives. Some of the things that I described in the first edition, like the standard very small battery cages, the wire cages for hens, or the individual stalls for veal calves or for sows that prevented them really walking more than a single step and stopped them turning around. The stalls are too narrow for them to turn around. They're no longer legal in the European Union. But in the United States, for example, most of those things still are legal, generally, with the exception of a few states like California that have also followed the practices of the European Union to some extent and prohibited those practices. But most of the United States, and especially the states where most of the farmed animals are raised, don't have any of those laws protecting animals.
So, of course, it's good news to hear of the improvement of conditions for animals on factory farms. But there are, I think there are sort of two directions in which your views on animals could potentially be criticised. One is from the side that says that animals don't have moral worth, we should be able to eat them and treat them as we please. But there's also a side that is a more rights-based, absolutist liberation approach that will say that celebrating things like larger cages, when really what we're after is no cages at all, is potentially mistaken. I'm sure you've come across this criticism, but I wonder what you think of that, what you think the effect might be of saying, look, here are some great improvements in animal farming. Now, pigs can't be kept in cages so small they can't turn around, but they can still be kept in cages. And by saying that, we've made such tremendous strides, at least in the EU, in terms of animal welfare, do you think this might have an effect on convincing people to empty the cages altogether because they're sort of lulled into a sense that actually our treatment of animals isn't that bad anymore?
Well, firstly, let me say that you said tremendous improvements. I didn't say tremendous improvements. I said there have been some improvements. So I'm not celebrating these as huge successes. I do think they're improvements. I think they give many millions of animals, including the laying hens. We're talking about hundreds of millions of animals, somewhat better lives. But it's quite true that they can still be kept in cages. They're not always kept in cages. One of the advantages of these improvements is that it raises the cost of producing the animals or their eggs, whatever it might be, not very greatly, but to a small amount. And therefore, some farmers may say, well, given that we can only keep them in larger cages, we might not keep them in cages at all. And the other thing about the cost being raised is that some people may therefore decide to buy fewer of those products, or they may decide not to buy them at all and to move to a plant-based diet. And when we get plant-based foods competing with animal products, then price is going to be relevant. At the moment, those plant-based foods are not really competing economically with the cheaper end of animal products. But if we can improve welfare conditions, then they'll have a better chance of competing because the price of those animal products will go up. So that's the first part of my answer, that I do think that this helps economically to replace these animal products. The second part of my answer is that I think it actually disregards the interests of animals to say we should not work for improvements in their welfare because what we want is the abolition of animal exploitation, full stop. Now, of course, I want the abolition of animal exploitation, full stop, too. I would love to see that happen, but I don't see a way of making that happen within the foreseeable future. I'm certainly prepared to argue, and I do argue in the book for eating a plant-based diet. I think that's definitely the most ethical diet. But and I'm pleased I talk about the fact that there's been a rise in vegan or plant-based eating over the last couple of decades. Very good. But how many vegans do we have, say, in the United Kingdom? And the figure that I've seen is 1.2 million. So that's terrific. It's a huge improvement over when the book was first appeared, when probably it was in the hundreds or definitely in the thousands, not tens of thousands. So that's great, but it's still a small percentage of the population, and it still means that most Britons are eating animal products, and they are eating factory-farmed animal products. And I don't see that just calling for the abolition of animal exploitation is going to lead to that glorious day when there are no animal products produced or consumed, within the next 20 or 30 years. So you're going to have generation after generation of these animals living in horrible conditions, and those people who say we shouldn't work for improvements are essentially condemning them to those horrible conditions for many years to come, without any real basis, I think, or any real evidence for saying that we will improve the prospects of abolishing animal exploitation if we set ourselves against working for any kinds of improvements. I don't see that that's going to work at all. And in fact, if you look at the countries that have the largest numbers of vegans, they're also countries that have better animal welfare policies. Again, like the United Kingdom, like some of the countries of the European Union, they have significantly higher proportions of people who are not buying animal products at all than many of the other countries that have terrible conditions and no animal welfare laws.
I think for many people it might be something of a point of principle that advocating for improvements in the conditions of animal welfare seems to be an implicit condoning of the fact that they're being exploited at all. Now, I would imagine you wouldn't see it that way, but for example, you can imagine a time in which human beings were being sold as property and exploited and kept in horrible conditions, and being an advocate for better conditions on the slave ships. It's an example that we commonly hear. Do you think that the Peter Singer of the sort of 18th century might have been as open to that kind of approach to solving the problem of slavery? If you say, well, we're not going to get rid of this problem for another sort of 100 years or so, and in the meantime we may as well advocate for better conditions. Do you think there's sort of something a bit undignified about advocating for better conditions of exploited people when the only conditions we should be in favor of them experiencing is no exploitation at all?
I think it really depends on the prospects of getting to no exploitation at all within a foreseeable time frame. And I think that human slavery was very different from animal exploitation, or animal slavery, which is also what it is, because it was something of a new thing. And if we're talking about the slave trade, that is the trade in African slaves across to the United States and the Caribbean and some British possessions before the British abolished the slave trade. Then we're talking about something which hadn't been going for very long, which was a sort of innovation, which was not allowed in the United Kingdom, for example. I mean, slavery itself was said to be illegal, and so. It was not true in the northern United States either. So it was not a universal practice by any means. Although certainly slavery has existed in various cultures, unfortunately for various times. But it was by no means a universally accepted practice, or even a practice accepted by a large majority of people in generally the same culture, people who spoke the same language and exchanged ideas with each other. Unfortunately, the exploitation of animals is still largely accepted by the great majority of people. Pretty much everywhere in the world, I guess. There's some cultures, maybe Hindus who don't accept it, or Jains, but it is very largely accepted, and that's why I think it's much harder to get rid of actually than the human slave trade was. So that's one difference that I would see. If people say, nevertheless, on principle, we must not say that it's justified to exploit animals if they have better conditions, then we do have a deeper philosophical disagreement, because I am a consequentialist. That is, I judge what's right or wrong by its consequences, and particularly, more specifically, I'm a utilitarian, which means I'm concerned about the well-being of sentient beings, about reducing their suffering and increasing their happiness. And so I'm not going to take a stand on principle unless I believe that taking a stand on principle, or something that looks like principle, is actually going to have better consequences for all of those affected by it. And as I've already explained, I don't believe that saying we're not going to work for improved animal welfare in factory farms is going to have better consequences. On the contrary, I think it's going to have clearly worse consequences. And that's why I wouldn't want to take a stand just on principle, irrespective of the consequences.
I often hear you described as the father of the modern animal rights movement. Do you think that's something of a misnomer, if being a utilitarian, you're sort of looking at...
Yeah, the other thing that maybe Peter Singer is too nice of a guy to say this, but yeah, when Cosmic Skeptic was like, oh, don't you think it's undignified to like argue for better conditions, even if it has better consequences? How dignified something is like such a self-centered concern. It's like, what I mean? Like,
from a utilitarian perspective, yes. However, personally, like, I've always kind of felt that way. I've always had this very gut-wrenching feeling for people who have this concept that the solution is to treat these animals better. It's not to liberate them. It's
Well,
like treating
that's
this like
disgusting. People who
so.
think that,
Yeah. But at the
but
same,
I'm talking about people who think that it's like undignified to advocate for welfare, so they won't do it, like,
I
even if it has
mean,
better consequences.
this kind of just comes down to like your normative preferences, right? Like a deontologist might feel that way, whereas like a utilitarian might feel differently. And for me personally, hearing Peter Singer say how it would give plant-based alternatives like a more fair playing field if like farmers couldn't abuse the shit of their animals. Um, you know what? And it's definitely a really good argument. Actually, I didn't actually think about that. Like, obviously, the price of animal products would go up, but I think the my real big issue.
Well, and then he had another argument that was also really strong.
Oh, hold on. My second issue is like why I never really fully considered it was because, uh, just living in North America, I just it's hard for me to visualize that level of support for a policy. It's like maybe in California, since in California it stayed, but like California is left leaning. It's been left leaning for a while. But it's really hard for me to imagine that idea being marketed to the mainstream. So I didn't give it that much thought per se. But what were you gonna say? It's just I thought
Yeah,
like the next party coming in would just revoke it. So I didn't think that much. I didn't take it as seriously.
yeah. Well, I guess I had two things to say. The other thing was it also they're correlated, like animal welfare and animal liberation. So like if we lived in a culture that took animal welfare seriously, there would be more people who were interested in the animal liberation. But and so if you look at countries which, yeah, have better welfare policies, they also will have more vegans.
I mean, kind of, but I like what I would say is like is this like is it the chicken before the egg? Like as the saying goes, like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Like, does the welfare policies create some feeling of need for animal liberation, or is it just the case that people who is it causation or is it correlation? Like people who are involved, societies that value animal liberation, is it the case I'm it's terrible, is it the case that societies that value animal liberation are more likely to have animal welfare policies, or do animal welfare policies create some sense of moral inspiration for animal liberation?
Yeah.
And
So what I'm saying is that, like, in terms of idea space, they're close together. Like someone who identifies with animal welfare is more likely to identify with animal liberation. Like the way that normals think, right, is they don't think in terms of propositions. They think of like how close two ideas are together. Like if they're a left leaning person and you show them a right leaning idea, they'll say no, that's bad. And if you show them a left leaning idea, they'll say yeah, that's good. So if they're an animal welfarist and you show them animal liberation, they'll say like, oh yeah, that's okay. But if they're like a conservative crazy person, you show them animal liberation, they'll say no, that's crazy, right?
yeah, I guess, but I'm not too sure how that really like how does that really relevant to what I said? Keep in mind, like I'm doing other things in the background while you're talking. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm
I'll
just
stop.
I'm
I'll
just
stop. I'll
saying
focus.
that. Yeah, I'm just saying that's the reason that I'd say that if the culture that we lived in took animal welfare seriously, then they would also take animal liberation seriously.
I mean, like I think the issue I have with that is, I'm not convinced that like our political leaders, if they pass laws having more concern to animals, would I'm not even sure if it would really help inspire people to go vegan. Like I think that just it kind of comes
Well,
back to what I
if
said
that's
earlier.
okay, but if that's the case, then the argument against welfarism completely falls apart.
No,
right?
not really. Like, because like the argument of inflated cost of foods is still real.
No. I said the argument against welfarism, right? So usually the argument against, like as Cosmic Skeptic said, right? The argument against is if if they say that they have good welfare or whatever, then people will like be comfortable with it, right? And they won't say like, oh, this is some horrible atrocity. So they'll be less likely to support animal liberation, right? If you're saying that it has no effect on the perceptions of everyday people, then welfarism is just purely good, right? Or extra welfare is just purely good.
I think what I'm trying to say here is like basically there's a possibility that the like animal like for example people's concern for animals that inspire them to go vegan may or may not be caused by political decisions based around welfare and valuing of animals. Like maybe it is the case that when the state steps in and creates more animal welfare laws, it maybe because like some people passively make a fallacious mistake that their authorities and cultures dictate their morality. Maybe it does influence people to be more animal ethic conscious. Or I personally think it's actually the opposite. I think it's that animal conscious society influences our politicians to care about animals. Um, so like if we could actually, so I guess like overall it's like within the nation of Canada, I'm just really skeptical on any like restrictions on or at least like a lot of restrictions on animal agriculture that would inflate the cost of meat if it would last. I personally believe the opposition would repeal those bills. However, with that being said, with the idea of inflating the cost of animal-based products, that is actually a very strategically smart idea because it basically would make it harder for people to drastically abuse these animals while extremely dropping their prices. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think it's the other way around? Do you think that an animal conscious society? By the way, to the audience, I'm sorry I got off work kind of tired. Do you think an animal conscious society creates a decrease in the cost of animal based? Sorry, do you think an animal conscious society? Do you think it's that the authorities create a more animal conscious society, or do you think it's the other way around?
They feed into each other, right? Like if they passed a law that said like,
Yeah,
oh,
I
you
know,
can't have gestation
I
crates,
know they
then
feed into each other. I know they feed into each other, but how, like, to what extent? Do you think it's to a strong extent?
I don't know what that means. Like strong, like how would I even measure that?
Never mind. In that case, if you're saying they both feed into each other, then yeah, I'd agree. But you can continue.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and then the other thing I wanted to say was, yeah, that just I said, yeah, it seems very selfish. Like it seems ridiculous
Well,
to say
go.
like it's undignified. Like
Well,
that's like so, like to me that's disgusting that you won't do something that affects so many other people because you see it as undignified for yourself. Like that's like I'd see that as repulsive if someone said that to me. If what
I
Cosmic
would.
Skeptic,
I would have.
don't
I would have said that to you like a few years ago.
really, yeah,
Yeah.
damn,
You can say that. You can say it. You would be repulsed by me or my
yeah,
comment. I
that
won't
would
care.
be, I would find that
You can say
disgusting.
it. No, roast me, Chaddie. Roast me.
Oh, well, a few years ago I wasn't even vegan, so
Okay. So like moving forward, right? Like with what I just said there, like moving forward on the subject of like sorry. Moving forward on the subject, right? Like I do think they both feed into each other. I just think like authorities play into a small extent, but there's also a possibility that a society that implements more of these policies, it might inspire less people to go vegan.
Why?
Oh, because people could then believe, there's a possibility at the same time that people could personally believe that the animals don't suffer a whole lot and that they get to live a decent life and then they die.
Yeah, that I mean, but when that's just verifiably false, then
No.
it doesn't matter.
No. Like, so if let's say they passed a lot of laws to the point where there was a lot less factory farms, the animals that are being slaughtered, there's a possibility less people would consider going vegan. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is there's a possibility, even if we reduce the amount of animals being slaughtered and reduce that harm, there's a possibility less people would feel a need to be a part of a movement to reduce the harm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand what the intuition is, and it's the same intuition that Cosmic Skeptic had, but I'm going to say the opposite, right? That people don't think rationally, right? They think like if the government passes a law with regards to animal welfare, then they'll take animal welfare. People would be more likely to take animal welfare seriously.
Yeah, it's a kind of one. It's honestly, to me, something like this is like really interesting because it's what was it? The very concept is like very interesting because like political leaders do have, it would be disingenuous to say, oh, political leaders do not have influence over what is or what is not moral, because political leaders most definitely do have some level of influence, like, but I think that's where like it becomes more questionable, like how much influence do these political leaders really have, and how much would they really have over veganism. And I guess like I haven't actually really thought about it this in depthly until Peter Singer until I heard Peter Singer and Cosmic Skeptic talk about this. So that was kind of interesting. So yeah, I mean, like the idea of inflating the cost of animal-based products sounds pretty base to me. That's for sure. Because like animal-based products really do compete at a very unfair market advantage, even from like just a like libertarian capitalist perspective. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because they get billions of dollars from the U.S. government.
Yeah, they have the most. Yeah, it's an absolutely
God, I hate the U.S. government.
Yeah, it's an unfair advantage.
Yeah. Well, I think that's it, right?
All right, let's continue. Let's continue.
Consequences and welfare of animals rather than something like a deontological right.
I think it's something of a misnomer if I'm speaking to philosophers or people who are well educated in philosophy. And I know that your podcast does deal with philosophical questions quite a lot, and I expect that your listeners, therefore, particularly the regular ones, whether they've taken courses in philosophy or not, they've got through listening to your podcast some familiarity with these issues. So for them, I think to describe me as the father of the animal rights movement, they would say, how can a utilitarian be an animal rights advocate? But for the general public who simply describe the modern movement to improve the status of animals in a quite radical way, and going as far as saying we shouldn't be eating them, we shouldn't be doing many of the things that we do to them, many people just use the term the animal rights movement for that, and they don't specifically mean that this is a movement that is founded on the view that there are such things as intrinsic rights either for humans or animals. They just mean, oh well, these are the people who are asking for a radical change in the moral status of animals. And I go along with that. Of course, that is what I'm asking for. So in that popular sense, I don't mind being described as the father.
Yeah, well, we could just say the animal rights movement is with regards to legal rights, and then it wouldn't be unreasonable to call Peter Singer the father of the animal rights movement, especially since if you're really a deontologist and you believe in rights, there's no need for a movement for rights. They already have rights. They're just being violated, right? So it'd be we're looking for legal rights, right? That's what the movement is, right? I don't think that this is, but it's something silly and semantic anyway. But
sorry, I want to just go back just a little bit, just for a second, okay?
Yeah.
Rather than something like a deontological right.
Already explained, I don't believe that saying we're not going to work for improved animal welfare in factory farms is going to have better consequences. On the contrary, I think it's going to have clearly worse consequences. And that's why I wouldn't want to take a stand just on principle, irrespective of the consequences.
I often hear you described as the father of the modern animal rights movement. Do you think that's something of a misnomer, if being a utilitarian, you're sort of looking at consequences and welfare of animals rather than something like a deontological right?
I think it's something of a misnomer if I'm speaking to philosophers or people who are well educated in philosophy. And I know that your podcast does deal with philosophical questions quite a lot, and I expect that your listeners, therefore, particularly the regular ones, whether they've taken courses in philosophy or not, they've got through listening to your podcast some familiarity with these issues. So for them, I think to describe me as the father of the animal rights movement, they would say, how can a utilitarian be an animal rights advocate? But for the general public, who simply describe the modern movement to improve the status of animals in a quite radical way, and going as far as saying we shouldn't be eating them, we shouldn't be doing many of the things that we do to them, many people just use the term the animal rights movement for that, and they don't specifically mean that this is a movement that is founded on the view that there are such things as intrinsic rights, either for humans or animals. They just mean, oh, well, these are the people who are asking for a radical change in the moral status of animals. And I go along with that, of course, that is what I'm asking for. So in that popular sense, I don't mind being described as the father.
Well, we've used...
Okay, so... Okay, you there? Can you hear me?
Yeah. I think 2 times speed is too much. I guess it would.
I needed to because we were replaying it. So actually, I thought something popped up saying that there was a copyright on my video, my live stream. Like, oh fuck! But I went to my channel and it didn't seem to be the case. Thank goodness. Yeah. You know how YouTube is a fair, honest, and dignified platform that most definitely doesn't have unfair favoritism. Yeah. As we all know. But when we talk about so for example, you I think you've heard me talk about my definition where I include value and consideration as like one of the fundamental buzzwords rather than practical or utility or unnecessary or justified. So like realistically at the basis of it, it's either like we're people who value the animals, either the suffering, their well-being. We value and consider those sentient beings, and within that value and consideration, then there are different perspectives to uphold value and consideration for them. Now, like a negative utilitarian will say nuke the entire world potentially to reduce suffering for all sentient beings. A deontologist will want to protect their rights. A very silly, like this is kind of silly wordplay, but like I think there's a portion of like people who are into philosophy that they try to take a movement, veganism, which seems to be based around value and consideration, and they try to frame it around their normative framework. Like deontologists might say, you're not a deontologist. Sorry, you're not a vegan unless you value animal rights. If you kill an animal to maximize utility, then you're not a vegan. A utilitarian could say that you're not a good vegan, or they might maybe they might even say that they don't consider you vegan unless you maximize utility or like unnecessary.
I've never actually seen that.
I like vegan foot soldier goes down. I think vegan foot soldier goes down that route.
There's no way vegan foot soldier is a utilitarian.
No, but you'd make the argument that you're not a vegan if you're a utilitarian.
I've heard that a lot. Like a lot of people say that, but I don't think I've ever heard it the other way around, where a utilitarian says you're not a vegan. But I think usually what I hear is like completely uneducated carnists thinking that veganism and utilitarianism are like the same thing. But I don't think I've ever heard like an actual utilitarian ever say that you're not vegan if you're not a utilitarian.
Well, I think one of the problems we come to when we're talking about like animal ethics is I think there is like a portion of the world that will there's a portion of the world that will fucking there's a portion of the world that is really self-absorbed when it comes to normative ethics, and I think that is overrepresented on online discourse from what I have seen to be mainly deontologists and virtue ethicists, and myself, who probably leans more towards virtue ethics. I would personally say that I think a lot of deontologists and virtue ethicists, a lot of them tend to have like really strong emotional reactions to things that they don't necessarily prefer. A lot of them, from my experience, have been kind of militant, whereas utilitarians, a lot of them are willing to admit they would do terrible things to maximize utility. I think a lot of them perhaps maybe are more humbled because of the dark nature of what they're willing to potentially do to maximize utility. But like with that being said, right? Yeah, with that being said, what was it? Oh yeah, Chaddie, could you look on Discord? I'm gonna send you something. But with that being said, right? To me, it's this very silly word game, and I'm just saying, like, someone could define veganism as reducing suffering as much as practical as possible. Technically, a utilitarian could use that definition to say you're not vegan if you're not doing more, or if you're not doing X, Y, and Z, or.
People can have definitions that are crazy.
Did you get my message in Discord?
Yeah, well, I don't know how I would do that. You mean?
Just not. Don't say it out loud, Jesus, Chaddie. Holy
No, I think
crap.
I am doing that already, actually.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah. So with that being said, right? Yeah. To me, it's really just like a silly word game, right? Because I've heard people like make similar arguments that sound very similar to utilitarianism by nature by saying you're not reducing suffering as much as practical as possible. Which, it's basically, it's almost like an error in the code. It's when you create certain buzzwords, that have like a really strong flaw, like practical or necessary. When you create buzzwords that describe what is practical, you're not really describing the reasoning of what you the reasoning behind why you're valuing what is practical. So you're constantly in this race to justify every single new situation. So like basically when it comes to veganism, like there is a philosophical hole in most people's definitions, and I think I personally solved that problem just from like every discussion I've had. But yeah, like honestly, it's something that, in my opinion, that's so stupid. It's kind of stupid to say that, because like if he's going to use animal rights as his vehicle, then even in theory, if like he's not necessarily like a huge advocate of rights, because as a utilitarian, practically he basically is. So like I think most people would already know that. So I don't know. To me, it's like it's a good question to ask him, which is, it was good for Cosmic Skeptic to ask that question, but like in like philosophically, it's silly, you know?
Well, yeah, I said the same thing. It is certainly silly. It's just like a semantic little, and he doesn't even call himself that. That's not what he calls himself. Like that's what other people call him. I mean, it's just not a really serious question, but
yeah, no, it's an interesting one though. So I'm gonna mute up, and we'll. Or do you have anything else you want to say?
No, I was just gonna say we need to get to the part where he's fighting. He's fighting.
Yeah. Well, we'll eventually probably get there.
Used the word exploitation a number of times now, and I think a moment ago you said that you were looking forward to the end, or you desired the end of animal exploitation. Is that also correct terminology? I'm just trying to understand your position here. Is it animal exploitation that you're concerned about, or is it just animal suffering? Because, of course, at least in theory, we can exploit animals without causing them any suffering.
Well, that depends on how you use the term exploitation, I suppose, right? I think the term exploitation generally means you're using animals or humans, or in some cases non-sentient resources, like, we're going to exploit the minerals that exist here. I think it tends to mean we're using without any consideration or any serious consideration of the interests of those who we are exploiting. And clearly, if they're not sentient beings, then they don't need any consideration. They're not affected by it. But there are other uses, I admit, in which you could say, well, you're exploiting someone even though they benefit by it. That could be kind of a position, I suppose. And you might be saying, well, you're exploiting workers, even though they benefit because you're giving them employment, but you're taking nearly all of the profit and giving them just enough to get them to work for you. Yes, that could be exploitation, and I might think that is wrong, because that is not maximizing the welfare of all concerned, because the welfare of the workers is not probably being taken into account. So, I think whether you regard a utilitarian position as one that can use the term exploitation or not is going to depend entirely on which of these ways you're going to use that term. And I think people, again, they understand it in a popular sense as saying you're making use of beings without taking their interest into account. And if that's the usage, then I certainly want to say we should stop the exploitation of animals. If you have some more sophisticated meaning of the term, then tell me what that is, and I'll tell you whether I think that is or is not acceptable.
Well, I've sometimes heard exploitation defined as using something as a means to an end rather than as an end in itself. So, for example, in animal farming, we might talk of egg production or milk production, which, of course, in practice is a pretty disgusting industry. But in theory, the question is often asked of vegans, well, would you have a backyard chicken farm egg, or would you have milk if it came from a cow that was treated nicely? And sometimes the response comes that even if it is actually the case that these animals aren't suffering in the production of these products, which oftentimes they are. I mean, chickens laying eggs, if they've been selectively bred to lay more than natural, for example, it can still be painful. But presuming that it wasn't, a lot of people say, but this is still exploitation. Something like, look, it's not your product, it's not your egg, it's not your milk. And even though there's no discernible suffering that you could measure in the animal's brain, a lot of vegans say that, again, on principle, they think it would still be wrong to take those products because it's a form of exploitation. That is, seeing these animals as means to ends rather than ends in themselves, seeing them as the producers of food, seeing them as food themselves, which, of course, those perceptions are not, at least directly, going to harm the animal, but it's still seen as a problem.
Yes, I don't see it as a problem if it's not harming the animal or others. And in fact, the sort of Kantian idea that it's always wrong to use somebody as a means rather than as an end, I don't think is defensible, even when you apply it to humans. Gary Parfit has an example where you're in a building which is slowly crumbling or collapsing for some reason, and your child is with you, and there's a large concrete block that is slowly coming on top of your child and will crush your child to death. And the only way you can stop this is by moving the leg of an unconscious person who's been injured, rendered unconscious in this accident that's causing the building to crumble. And if you move their leg to sort of hold up the concrete block, they will have a broken toe, but your child will be saved. Now, you're using them as a means. They haven't given consent. They're going to be injured slightly, but your child's life is going to be saved. I think that's the right thing to do. I think it would actually be wrong to say, no, I can't touch the stranger. I can't do something that will harm the stranger in any way without the stranger's consent. Therefore, I must allow my child to be crushed to death. That seems grotesque to me. So it's not an absolute rule. I think anybody who thinks carefully about it will say it's not an absolute rule that you can never use another human being as a means to an end without their consent. And I don't think it's an absolute rule for non-human animals as well.
And perhaps that could still be considered exploitation under some definitions, but I guess there you would just be saying that exploitation isn't always wrong. I know that some time ago in an Instagram post, I remember reading that.
Do you want to talk about what was said, or?
I think Peter Singer, really responded to that accurately. Obviously, I think it's ridiculous too to say that you can exploit someone while also benefiting them. Like, but if exploitation is supposed to be something that's bad,
I mean, like, it depends. Like, if you make it something so broad, like, if I said using something is exploitation, so technically, like, let's say I have an employer. Is my employer exploiting me? He's making a lot of money off me, but I also get to make a living. Like a socialist would say that's like it's bad no matter what. I would say, but particularly like from a capitalist standpoint, like, no, there's a justified reason for this relationship. Like, and to make a more palatable argument for, let's say, a socialist or someone who's left wing. Like I could say, like having a guard dog or a dog guard my home, I treat it nicely. But realistically, there's a possibility that
you
dog,
mean them?
Dog. Let's say I have a guard dog. What do you mean by them? Calling a dog?
No, yeah, you just. I thought you used the it pronoun for a dog for that. That's
yeah,
bigotry.
I did. It. I mean,
that's bigotry.
Exactly. Well, keep in mind, like I'm from a different generation. Spare me. But like,
you're basically like my racist, grandfather. Like what?
Yeah. I'm trying not to be racist to the animal speciesist. But like realistically, like if I had a dog, and if that dog, I treated my dog. If I treated them nicely, honestly, maybe it would be better to use like certain pronouns that have more of a connotation of personhood.
Well, I absolutely agree with that. Yeah, I mean,
I just like I guess I haven't really thought about that because I think it's just it's something that's so passive in our language. But it's good to monitor. It's not good to police language, but I think it's good to monitor and question language, which is where we question how we use language and what is the appropriate way to use language. And I think that's where you have the most like in-depth philosophical rational realizations of how to most appropriately use language to your own value. So like what I would say is like if I had a dog and if I was using them and if I was like treating them nicely, but I was using them to like protect my home, but the dog gets to live a good life, you know, it shits on the floor sometimes, you know, it lays on my bed, licks me, you know, maybe it like chases its tail and acts adorable. Like, am I like abusing this animal by having it as a pet? Like, am I exploiting it? Like, the fact that I have that dog there to protect my home, even if I've never hurt that dog once. There are some vegans that would argue that owning pets is a means of exploitation. And to some extent, like, you're right. Like, there's certain type of exotic pets, like birds. They're meant to fly around. You know, if you have to keep your bird in a cage, you know, did you really liberate that bird? Is that bird really free? You know, it's a really hard question to ask. But at the same time, right? Like when we have when we have dogs and cats that actually consider like our house their home, you know, it's you know, when they have like a certain place to sleep, and that animal, you know, will want to return to that place to sleep at the end of the night, you know, you have to like. I think it's silly to say that you are exploiting that animal in a bad connotation or something. Like, in other words, what I'm trying to say is like not all exploitation is unjustified. We can have some perceived perspectives of exploitation, aka using a sentient being or using a sentient being to your own advantage. We can have some level of that is justified. For example, but again, I'm not really looking up a definition of exploitation. Like, let me look up the definition.
Well, I don't think that we need to look up a definition. Like Cosmic Skeptic's about to give his, so why not?
I mean, the act of employing to the greatest possible advantage. Yeah, I could say the act of employing to the greatest possible advantage, utilizing the utilization of another person or group for selfish purposes. Like even the second definition works pretty well for my example. An advertising or public program. I mean, like, yeah, I guess when it comes down to the subject of exploitation, like, it really comes down to what you define as exploitation, because it can be so fucking broad. It can be so ridiculously broad. It could literally encompass something as so much as having a friend, you know? Am I exploiting my friend because I selfishly want my friend to be my life? You know, it's like, where does it stop and where does it end? But I think like something that's definitely good to keep in mind is one of the problems is even if an animal doesn't suffer, is there is an issue with people seeing these products and these goods as consumables. As people see, like it would be more ideal if people saw these things like eggs as something that's not food,
as
almost
the
no matter what.
female reproductive cell.
Yeah, like
maybe that's what we should see them as.
Because like what if like so in a hypothetical, right? Like
female gamete even.
So let's say like if you're in the middle of nowhere, most people would eat like a chicken egg. Let's say a chicken was laying like, let's say a chicken laid a few eggs and then that chicken died. You know, and you're crawling around and you see a dead bird. Next to a dead bird, you see a nest. Like you know, is it morally wrong for you to eat those eggs? You know, I'd probably say no, it's not. Let's say you saw the mommy and dad birdie, they're both dead, and then you know you're not really I'm sorry.
But that's abortion though. So you have to think about abortion.
Yeah. Well, let's just say in like a hypothetical where these animals did not they weren't sentient. Let's say they're freshly laid eggs and
unfertilized.
Yeah, and both of them, mommy and daddy birdie, are dead. You see them there; they're dead. They died from something, whatever. Would it be unethical for you to eat those eggs? I'd probably say no, but there is the issue where people might have like an adopted chicken, right? And someone might adopt a chicken. They might save it from like a hellish factory farm, and if that person starts eating the eggs because they lay so many eggs, is that a bad thing? Because is it a bad thing for people to be doing it from a utilitarian standpoint, or from a rights standpoint? Like, if people see these eggs as food, would it be more ideal for people to not see these eggs as food?
Yeah, certainly it would be. That's why I would say, that it would still be wrong in most of these cases to like eat these products. But yeah, but in the situation specified, I think he was saying, like, he said specifically, like, oh, if there were no like knock-on effects, or Peter Singer said that, but I don't think, maybe Alex didn't specify that, but
yeah. Anyways, yeah, we'll continue.
You had, I think this was a quote from your book Why Vegan, or the introduction to it, that you described yourself as a flexible vegan. Could you tell us a bit about what that means?
Yeah, sure. It means that when I have the opportunity to eat vegan, that is what I will do. But there may be occasions. I don't think it's vital to be hardline in every circumstances. And sometimes, for example, if you don't eat something that is prepared, maybe it will be wasted and there will be no other consequences. So, for example, you get on a plane and they've mixed up your order for a vegan meal. It happens, and they put something else in front of you. Now, if it was meat, I wouldn't want to eat it anyway, but it might be something that's not vegan, but is got some dairy or something like that in it. And it's clear, they've served it to you. They're just going to throw it away if you don't eat it. I don't really see a problem about eating that. So that's one way in which I'm flexible. I'm also, I guess, strictly speaking, not vegan, because what I'm concerned about as far as animals are an issue is, again, as we've been talking about, their capacity to suffer. And I'm not convinced that everything that is described by zoologist as an animal is capable of suffering. I would say an example might be an oyster. I discussed this in Animal Liberation Now. I sort of revisit the discussion I had in the original edition of Animal Liberation, and I continue to think, and there's support for this, that it's very unlikely that oysters are capable of suffering. Also, oyster farming serves a positive environmental purpose, because oysters clean the water. So oyster farming in waters that are otherwise might become polluted in some ways will be performing a service. So I don't see a problem about eating oysters if you want to eat oysters. It's not something that I eat very often, but I wouldn't really object to that. And I wouldn't say, no, I'm a vegan, I can't eat an oyster because it's an animal, even if I believe that it doesn't suffer and that environmentally it's just as good or better to eat oysters than to eat some grains or other plant products.
Yeah, I know a lot of vegans who...
Does he even have a definition of vegan? Like, what the fuck?
The definition that he's using is the colloquial definition. That is someone who abstains from all animal products. I don't think there's anything wrong with using the colloquial definition.
I mean, well, it's the connotations that sort of trigger me. So, like, for example, like flexitarians. So, a flexible vegan can mean so many things.
Yeah, I agree. This guy's cringe.
So, normalizing, the normalization of use of that language is a terrible, and I mean a god awful means of his articulations. What was it? It's like, for example, like I think what a better way to say is, like, he cares about the demand that he puts out there in the market, not about the supply or the usage. So, for example, like dumpster diving for animal-based products, or eating, like, for example, let's say this has happened to me where my orders have been mixed up and somebody gave me a plant-based, something that's not plant-based. A few times I ate it, but not anymore, because I realized if I eat it, then the restaurant might not take it as seriously. But if I refuse to eat it, I think the restaurant starts to take these things more seriously.
I would.
Like,
I would.
Like, for example, like, let's say a server fucked up my order, and if I ate it anyways, the server might not take it as seriously. Now, if the next time when the server fucked up an order and that food goes to waste, if that server keeps doing that every time a vegan walks in, it's not going to be good for them, right? So by my leniency can create
Well,
a
food going to
normalization of
waste doesn't
things.
matter to them, right? You'd have to not pay
No,
them for
it
them to
does
care.
matter to them because like their employer would not be happy about it. And if they
Wait,
are
whoa,
the
whoa, whoa,
employer, then
hold
they want to
on.
reduce food waste.
No, why would they care about food waste? And they care if you pay them, right? Like it would be one thing if they mess up your order and then so you're like, okay, well then I'm not paying for this.
Well,
Bye. Then
yeah,
they might
then
care.
they would.
But
Yeah, then that's my whole point. Like for example, let's say I sit down at a restaurant, I order the vegan thing on the menu. I say make it vegan, please. No dairy, no egg, whatever. They come back like, oh, sorry, this thing wasn't vegan, or like this thing, or let's say I didn't say like, no dairy, no egg, no fish. They're like, oh wait, there is dairy. When I refuse to eat that, I think it sends a very strong message to the server
yeah,
what vegan means, because
yeah,
so many people don't know what vegan means. That when people one of the problems is with like, let's say, even though it's like, I would say it's not philosophically, it doesn't necessarily philosophically mean that you're a bad person for eating, let's say some animal-based product that was accidentally given to you that would be thrown away and would be put to food waste if you didn't eat it. I don't think it makes you a bad person, but I think what is bad is the fact that these servers won't take it as seriously.
yeah.
Like
You
you
know
have to
what?
understand. You have to understand when you're working in the hospitality industry, your employer is breathing down your neck to reduce waste. So food waste, alcohol waste, pop waste. Like the bread and butter of their industry is alcohol, pop, and like food. So they don't want to waste the food. So if somebody let's say there's a server and there's 5 people who are vegan that come in throughout the week, and each time that server fucked up their order and didn't learn what veganism was or what vegan means when someone says, I'm vegan, I don't want this. And let's say the server kept doing that again for another 5 customers the next following week. Their employer might get frustrated. And to me, that's how I see it. That's why I think it's probably better if we refuse to eat certain things, generally speaking, when someone screws up our order.
But you have to specifically refuse to pay too, like, because otherwise,
Yeah, obviously refuse to pay.
yeah. But yeah, so the giga chat. See, they were talking about this before. I think this was in the last time these two talked to each other. They said like, oh, if you were at a restaurant and you order something and then it comes out and it's got like Parmesan on it or something, they put Parmesan on it. When you said no Parmesan, and they said that they would just eat it. Like that's not a based giga chat move. The base Giga Chad move would be order comes out and you just get up and leave. Based Giga Chad, like, oh my goodness, no chance you'd eat that. Literally zero chance. Neither of these two are Giga Chads, though. Oh, you got to admit that. Like, even though Singer's right about normative ethics, and meta ethics, he's no Giga Chad. That's what I'll say. All right. Yeah,
but then again, it also depends. Like, was Singer saying like practically he would not refuse to eat these products, or was he saying normatively he would not refuse? So like we would have to further ask questions and clarify. He might agree with our positions. He might actually already agree with our positions during his interview.
I'm pretty sure normatively and metaethically he agrees with me entirely. Like,
No. I'm saying normatively and practically.
But practically, he would like do the thing. Like he would eat if they gave him like a meal with Parmesan on it, he would just eat it.
I mean, are you sure he was talking? Maybe I'm just not listening very well.
This was the last time they talked. This was on the.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you're saying the last time they talked, this is what you took from it?
That's what he said that, or they both said that. They said they had this hypothetical where they go to a restaurant and the waiter brings out their food and they put Parmesan on it, and they both said that they would eat it.
Yeah. So to the audience, I really am a terrible listener.
But very, very beta like, very Chad versus virgin. They're both on the virgin side very clearly. And here's the thing. Yeah, Peter Singer, it's crazy because he's such a giga Chad with regards to like normative ethics. I mean, we'll get to that later. Like when he's a bullet chomper, yum, killing infants, delicious. That's what.
Yeah, someone
But
who
then
bites the bullet admits it to it. The chomper embraces it. He is a Chad.
Yeah.
Chad energy.
But yeah, anyway,
Slay King.
This is the worst part. This is the part where Peter Singer is being cringe. I want to get to the part where he's a giga Chad.
So basically, do you have any disagreement with what I? So we're both in complete agreement about like the difference between normative and practical consumption of animal products potentially at waste at a restaurant. We both agree with that, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're in agreement.
Yeah. So like, if there's like, but what I do think is like, I think like something else. I think is like, it's just like I don't have like an issue with ethical freegans in a sense. Like if they eat an animal product when they're dumpster diving. In my opinion, they really are reducing harm. I think like I do take an issue with it practically in a sense, because
right.
There's a small issue I take, and the small issue is like
we'll disagree.
The small issue is like I just think it would be better if like humans slowly over time eat less animal products throughout our history of our genealogy to try and eventually evolve more towards herbivores. Like I kind of want humans to evolve more towards herbivores.
We're already there.
No, I'd say even more. In other words, a spectrum from now. A spectrum in comparison to now.
What if I don't plan to have any kids? Then it wouldn't matter.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying, like, yeah, I know. In that case, it wouldn't matter. But like that is my only issue.
Actually, it doesn't matter either way, whether you're going to have kids or not. Actually,
I would,
because I wouldn't change your genes.
I would say it would. Well, it does slowly over time, like over the generations. So, like for example, like in a world where everyone's vegan, I would hope that there would be less free. I would hope. Basically, I'm just speaking from like I'm speaking from like an evolutionary standpoint that I think is generally not super relevant in the modern day and age. It is a little bit relevant. Maybe it's more relevant if you want to have kids. But beyond that, like our genealogy changes over a long period of time, but but the long periods of time depends on what happens within the short periods of time. So, but you know, I'm not an evolutionary scientist. I'm not an expert on this, but I should definitely read more about this. But yeah, that's just like my opinion on it.
Just recently. Do you know Megalary?
Not really. Like I've seen him around.
Huge freegan, major freegan. Anyway, I had a dream where Megalary, I was in high school, right? And Megalary was going to the same high school, and Megalary gives me, this chocolate, like half-eaten chocolate.
Have you ever even heard him talk? He just kind of seems like a bot.
No, actually, in my dream, Megalary was a woman.
I mean, like let's not even. I'm not sure if I want to talk about him, like, because I don't know. I don't want to. For all I know, this person's just a bot or someone else we know. So
yeah, maybe. But do you think I should have taken it, right, in my dream? If the dream were real,
taken what?
In the dream, Megalary gave me like this half-eaten chocolate, presumably from the garbage.
No.
You think I should deny it?
I mean, it's probably not very healthy for you.
That's true. I can't deny that.
I mean, that's probably another practical issue with dumpster diving, but yeah, I guess
it's sick from once actually.
Yeah, I guess like but yeah, like it would be dishonest. From what I understand, it would be dishonest to say that humans have not gone through any like evolutionary adaptations to consume meat. But it would be nice if humans stopped consuming meat, and then over time, for vegans who do want to have kids, to eat a more plant-based diet, and over generations, hopefully, like we can like this is very hopeful. Hopefully, we can change the genealogy of humans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like
that is thinking
massively more effective.
That is thinking very long term. that sounds kind of crazy, but eugenics, but okay, I think you're crazy anyways, so
Yeah,
but then again, it would also depend on like what things that you're like selecting for and quote unquote eugenics.
your thing is just eugenics with extra steps, like, all right, like, oh, what?
Everyone that's low IQ, basically.
Well, yeah, no, not low IQ, right? You're trying to bring out the genes for like more herbivorous people by making everyone eat herbivorously, like not. I mean, that's it. It's just eugenics with extra steps. Like
Oh, you're saying it's eugenics? Yeah, basically. Well, more like sexual selection, but then you'd have to say sexual selection is eugenics. So I
yeah,
mean, like, well, no, not sexual selection, natural selection. I'm tired. That's just natural
but
selection.
your thing isn't natural, right?
Wait, no, is it? Um,
It's not natural, right? It's eugenics is not
no,
artificial, or it's not natural
It's not
selection, it's
natural.
artificial
No,
selection.
no.
That's what you're trying to do.
Yeah, it's I'm not sure
I,
what I'm not sure what the proper term for it is. No, because you're right. I'm not sure if this falls under the definition of natural selection. Like if you were just say natural selection is like environmental, and like if I would say, oh, it's environmental pressures for
well,
evolution.
HSD. Let me say this.
Then I could say what I said was natural selection. But depending on like the definition of natural selection, I might just be misusing that word. So
but maybe eugenics isn't something you can talk about.
no, but what I'm trying to say here is like technically it might fall under my definition of natural selection. Like like if I just say that natural selection is environmental pressures. So environmental pressures would also even be like potentially emotional pressures that we feel within our modern environment. And if our emotions our morality is making us want to eat a plant-based diet, then I would say it's just a natural selection pressure. But I might be misusing natural selection. But yeah, actually, so with that being said, I will press the play button.
Yeah.
Have no problem eating animal products that are about to go to waste. Again, there's some consideration that we're maybe seeing animals and animal products as food here in a way that is if not harmful, then wrong. But of course, as a consequentialist, that probably wouldn't apply to you. And in the case of oysters, we're essentially offering a justification that there is no suffering involved. But I've heard you also say that you will eat free-range eggs, and I had a look to see if I could find some other quotes, and I found something from 2006. So I don't know if your views are still the same, but in an interview with The Vegan, you said you could imagine a world in which people mostly eat plant-based foods, but occasionally treat themselves to the luxury of free-range eggs, or possibly even meat from animals who live good lives under conditions natural for their species, and are then humanely killed on the farm. That's the quote that jumped out at me, and I think the words there, humanely killed, are seen by many, if that killing is unnecessary, as a contradiction in terms.
Did I just mishear what he just said?
What do you mean? Who?
Did the Cosmic Skeptic just say that Peter Singer said it'd be all right if a small portion of people ate humanely killed animals? Did I mishear that, or?
Well, I think. Well, he said people very rarely, but occasionally, eat humanely killed animals.
Jesus, is Peter Singer even a utilitarian?
Yeah, he's a utilitarian. But I guess he disagree on the calculations.
I mean, it sounds like a pretty shitty utilitarian to me.
Damn.
And trust me, I know what shit is. I am a piece of shit. No, really, my icon's a piece of shit.
True. Yeah. I mean, we'll see what Peter Singer says. If it were me here, I'd say like no. Well, I would say something like no. That's probably bad to do something like that. And then only if he like pulls out like the crazy hypotheticals, then that's when you get bullet chomping. But well, I wonder if he bites this bullet right now.
All right, let's press play.
Could you explain what you mean by that as well?
Yeah, I know. I would still hold those views that you just quoted. So in terms of the free-range eggs, I think that of all the animal products that are available commercially, they're probably the least harmful ones, because, and I'm talking about a genuine free-range farm where the animals are outside, where they have a grassed run. They're not dense. They're not stocked so densely that the grass gets killed, which is one sign that you've got too many chickens on.
Yes, just for the sake of the audience, I presume you're not talking here about just eggs that are labeled free-range by the supermarket, but actually free-range eggs, because that will be one of the criticisms I think you'll receive there, is that free-range eggs aren't in fact free-range. You're talking about actually free-range eggs. What would be the conditions there for the kind of free-range conditions that you think would make it acceptable to eat the eggs?
So we have eggs in I'm speaking to you from Melbourne, Australia. We have eggs in Australia, particularly that you like to get from stores that stock more organic produce, but you get them in some supermarkets, where you're told how many hens there are per hectare. Obviously you might want to check that information. Sometimes you can call the farm and say, can I visit? I'd like to see how your hens are kept. But some of them say, let's say, have 500 hens per hectare. That's a low stocking density. That's low enough for the grass to remain healthy, for there still to be things to eat that the hens find. It's not just like packed dirt or anything like that. That is not really interesting. So I think that's a reasonable sort of stocking density. In fact, you could debate how far you would go. I don't know. You could maybe go to 1,000 hens per hectare. So I think that's the kind of information that you need to judge if these are what I would consider genuinely free range. And you would want to know, of course, that the birds are able to go outside during daylight hours in all normal weather. Maybe there's some, depending where in the world you are, maybe you might keep them in blizzard conditions or something of that sort. But generally, hens can decide for themselves when they want to go out, as long as they have shelter and access to the outdoors. They'll decide for themselves. So that's the kind of free range eggs that I'm talking about. And the other thing to say about free range chickens and eggs, as distinct from, say, free range or grass-fed beef, is that grass-fed beef is disastrous from a climate change point of view. The methane emissions are high. In fact, they're actually higher in grass-fed beef than they are in grain-fed beef, because it takes longer for the animal to put on.
Let's just hear him out. We're sitting through the cancer. I'm already scheduling my chemo. Let's just hear him out, Chaddie. Let's mute up.
On weight, which is why they're commercially usually fed on grain. But with laying hens, that's not an issue. They don't produce methane. So I think that's why I say, if you do want to eat animal products and you want to get them commercially, you can't produce them by yourself, you're not living on land, then finding a supplier of bona fide free range eggs, I think is something that can be defended. And the other thing that I would say about this, which also goes back to your point about the humanely killed animals that are raised, is that produce them by yourself, you're not living on land, then finding a supplier of bona fide free range eggs, I think is something that can be defended. And the other thing that I would say about this, which also goes back to your point about the humanely killed animals that are raised, is there's a deeper philosophical question here. And when people say, well, you shouldn't be killing this animal, and incidentally, the hens on free range farms will generally be killed when they stop laying eggs or when their rate of laying eggs declines. And also, of course, the male chicks of these varieties of hens who lay eggs well are not going to be raised for meat. They're going to be killed as chicks. Although there is work going on in Europe now to sex the eggs so that you don't get male chicks of the laying breeds. I think in France and Germany, they've actually passed laws requiring that to be phased in now. I'm not sure what the deadline is, but I think it's pretty soon. So, that would avoid that problem. But the deeper philosophical problem here is to say these hens, let's say they do have good lives. Let's just take that as accepted. You look at them, on the whole, they have good lives. They have shorter lives than they would have if they lived out their life in full. Is it a harm to them to bring them into existence, to have those good lives for a certain period of time, and then to be killed in a way that they suffer no pain from? They have no anticipation of being killed. They're killed very quickly, and there's no pain. So, and that's what I mean by humanely killed, by the way. And I think that can happen. Again, it doesn't happen standardly at commercial slaughterhouses, but it can happen. And these again, I referred to Parfit a moment earlier, but this is a different and perhaps more famous problem that Parfit raises about population ethics. Is it good that there be more people in existence if the total amount of happiness is greater, although the average is a little less, as long as they still have positive lives? That's a problem which I don't think anybody has given a satisfactory answer to, and Parfit sadly died without being able to give a satisfactory answer to it himself. So given how difficult that problem is, I can't say with any confidence that it's wrong to bring animals into existence, give them good lives, and then kill them in a way that causes them no suffering. I don't know any philosopher who could really argue without solving Parfit's problems that is unequivocally wrong.
But indeed,
Yikes. Well, first, I know the problem that he's talking about.
Holy shit.
How does he's saying like, oh, I don't have a view. He's a utilitarian. Like, what are you talking about?
I love this. I love this. That is the 40-year-old vegan. I've lost more B12 in the last minute than I have in my entire. Yo, 40-year-old vegan. You want to pop up? if you want to pop up in here, just let me know. I think you have me on Discord. You can DM me, and I might just shoot you the link if you want to just sit in here and chat with us.
That was the
And,
most based thing I've ever read in my entire life.
Jesus,
Damn.
yeah, like this man deserves like a Nobel Peace Prize for that comment. Okay, so I mean, like, Chaddie, do you have anything else more you want to say? Because like I'm at a loss for words here.
Yeah. I was gonna say. Well, I think I said this. That the first thing was, how does he not have a view on who's this guy Parfait? How do they not have a view on this problem? Like he's a utilitarian, right? He should say, I know what the answer is. There's nothing wrong with, as long as it increases total utility. But the other thing is, yikes! Like this is cringe. Like even
Well,
if
I
it
think
was
I know
true-
what he's saying. I think what he's basically saying. Oh, you go. Can I interject? May I interject?
Yeah.
Okay, so my interjection would simply be like what he just said. Yeah, maybe next time. No worries for your old vegan. So yeah, basically, like, so when it comes to like my perspective on it, like essentially what he might be saying is like there's different utilitarian arguments for and against increasing a population that increases the amount of happiness in comparison to suffering, or pleasure, depending on like who's like, going to frame that argument that he gave or hypothetical. But I think you can continue.
No, that there is the utilitarian view, which is that as long as utilities increasing the population would be good.
Yeah, but
And then there's the like touchy-feely answer that Parfait or whoever gave, where he's like, no, that means utilitarian's wrong, because it's obviously if we increase the population, the average happiness has to go up, otherwise we're being evil.
The average happiness,
Yeah.
I haven't heard of that before. The average happiness of their life, or average happiness of what?
Yeah. Haven't you heard of the quote unquote repugnant conclusion?
I have not even heard a hypothetical that he brought up, and it's kind of going in one ear after the other in the sense of like phrasing of words. I'm kind of tired after work.
So this is like the argument against utilitarianism, where they say, like, let's say people have lives of total 100 happiness, and then there are 1,000 people in the world, right? And then you compare that to a world where there's 100 trillion people, but their happiness is only at 0.1 or something, like barely worth living, versus like the other people were like,
oh yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. So yeah, that's, but I was trying to say is like the average happiness of the beings you brought into existence, or the average happiness of all beings. That's what I meant to say.
The average happiness of all. Well,
yeah, I know. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it has to be of all beings, since the average happiness of the beings you are bringing into existence has to increase, but it's starting at 0.
Well, technically, I could then say so basically the average. So okay. So yeah, it would be I'm being silly. The average increase or decrease of all beings. I don't really see that as an argument. I'm not sure how does this argue against utilitarianism? I'm too tired. My brain's a little dead.
Because the utilitarian would say the world where there's 100 trillion people and all their lives are barely worth living. That's a better world than when there's only 1,000 people, but all their lives are big poppin', right?
I mean, that depends. I guess that also depends on what type of utilitarian you are. Like, if you value suffering. So, if you value
it's not actually. It doesn't change. Well, if you're a negative utilitarian, then it would.
Hold on. What I'm trying to say is you could lean negative, or you could be a negative utilitarian.
Yeah, I guess you're right. If you're a negative utilitarian, you're right. Then you would say no. The repugnant conclusion is wrong. Right.
Yeah. So somebody doesn't necessarily have to be a negative utilitarian to lean negative, or to
There are some crazier hypotheticals against negative utilitarians, though.
Well, I'm not necessarily saying negative utilitarian. I'm saying someone who's negative or leans negative, or also
Well, if
maybe
they
maybe
lean
even
negative, that doesn't
also.
change anything.
Okay.
It would be the exact same, because if you're like quote unquote leaning negative,
So
then you're
what
still
would
just a
your?
hedonistic.
Oh, sorry, you go.
You're still just a hedonistic or like positive or whatever they call it, like a
So-
regular utilitarian. Even if you
So
lean negative,
as a hedonistic utilitarian, what would your response to be to that hypothetical?
I'd say it sounds like we need to get 1 trillion people on this server. 100 trillion even.
So if it increases happiness, but they're all miserable, you'd rather do that?
Well, but they're not all miserable. They're all just happy, just by a little bit instead of a lot, right?
So you'd rather have a lot of people who are just a little bit happy than a few people who are very happy, right?
Well, only if the total happiness is greater.
Okay. I guess that's kind of like weird of how you measure. I guess someone can measure total happiness as like the average total happiness or the average happiness of the average person. I guess that depends on like how you measure that, right?
There is like a utilitarian view that looks at like the average. Although
Yeah, so
I think it's silly, but
so
like,
basically, so like something I want actually, can I get into my perspective?
Yeah.
So like I think like my perspective on this is it's hard for me to imagine a world like, for example, if you do not see like the moral imperative of ethically of why we don't harm humans or why we don't exploit humans as for like the same moral imperative for animals, then I can't really I can't imagine someone actually adopting positions that would increase utility, or at least like Jesus and Christ, what he just said there. Like if they're killed humanely and they get to live a good life, then it's not a bad. Jesus and like how can then you're not liberating animals, and your book Animal Liberation is just it's misleading if that's your position. Like, or maybe it's misleading. Like maybe his whole book is misleading. Maybe he's.
If you remember at the beginning,
he's just
he
a
said that
fraud.
he would like to see animal liberation.
Yeah, maybe he's just lying to himself. Like, what is going on here? Like to me, this
it's interesting to me, I guess. Well, maybe he has a different understanding of what liberation is, but maybe liberation just means net positive lives.
I mean, my definition of animal, I could say my definition of animals liberation is to enslave them, is to liberate them from the wild and enslave them. So
that sounds base actually. The wild sucks.
Yeah. So let's, dude. Like, I know you're joking, but like, imagine like basically what I'm trying to say here is like his positions. Like, chill the jokes for a second because it's not bringing seriousness to the subject. You're not adding utility here.
Well,
Chaddie, just
I do think the wild is worse.
Stop, Chaddie.
I do think that actually.
Dude,
that's not a joke.
Dude. My point that I'm trying to get out here is like, if somebody listens to what Peter Singer is saying here, like, if that person believes in their mind that they would like to see animal liberation, but at the same time admits that, something that sounds very contradictory, which I don't even want to hear his like his mental gymnastics for how it's not, or maybe I do. My problem is it's hard to actually like if somebody can justify humane killing, then somebody could essentially move that threshold wherever they want for pleasure. Like how does someone come to the position of valuing sentience and of valuing a sentient being above the commodity, product, service, addiction, profit from that sentient being that they can derive it from? Like how does somebody come to the position of valuing and considering sentient beings? So when Peter Singer is saying what he's saying here, like I don't even understand how he can say something like that and not realize how that would decrease utility. Like, or how it could easily lead to decreases in utility. Like, what if we started enslaving humans and we only enslaved a very small portion of humans? and they got to live good
It's
lives.
very idealistic.
They got to live good lives, Chaddie, though, up until we killed them. And then on top of that, what if we also said it's okay to, like, support actual human slavery on a very small scale, so long as they get to live good lives, and, you can call the companies, obviously the companies could lie. Obviously you're not there in person. Obviously it's impossible to be there 24/7 and to be completely perfectly aware of their treatment. But, when there is another alternative. Like, it's the insanity of what he's saying here is like you it's like one of the issues I have when it comes to, like, normative and, like, meta ethics is, like, when you have, like, this idealistic perspective of how you want to see the world, and then you sort of you think of situations in hypotheticals that don't necessarily calculate to practicality, you can easily basically come to what I call psychologically comforting a bad idea. It's when you basically think of reasons that would justify and or reconfirm your previous position, or your position that you hold, rather than actually realizing the practical problems with your ideals in the real world. It's just, like, in other words, why even say that? Like, Jesus, he sounds like a terrible utilitarian. Like, God damn it.
Like, God, I hate
Holy.
utilitarians.
But, like, what's your opinion on what I said?
Well, I guess generally I agree. You said something like, "This is my problem with normative and meta ethics." I mean, there's nothing wrong with them. Just
No.
because
I
you
said
also
normative and meta ethics when they're taken, like, really ideally.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
like, they don't include practical. So, like, you're thinking about,
I
like,
agree with you,
your
yeah.
definitions of ethics. What is good? What is bad? You think of how people ought to behave, but you're not really thinking of how well it applies to the real world.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like this, I think that he's being very idealistic, and I don't like it. It's terrible.
By the way, for the chat listening, Chaddie's actually really, like, I'm sure Chaddie's tired too. Chaddie's actually really, he's a really smart person. I like to think I am, like, less of the R to the tard. I'm less, not so smart than the average Joe. But yeah, no, Chaddie's a really smart guy. But yeah, when it comes to, like, the subject, and I'm sure I do way worse at paying attention. Like, geez, thank you, Chaddie, for dealing with me. But
Yeah, of
it's
course,
just
anytime.
like I'm just in raw shock. Like, the same arguments he's giving are the same arguments to justify killing and eating an animal to begin with. Like, couldn't any random meat eater, they could actually espouse the exact same thing Peter Singer has said, and they could actually come to a different threshold of what they consider to be humane. Like, if the animal gets to experience 55% more happiness and suffering, is it worth bringing it into that existence? And, like, on top of that, like, it's also like, then we could go down the rabbit hole of the practical problems of how humans value other lives if they can normatively enslave animals. Like, the same behavior of enslaving an animal, someone else could use an appeal to nature, an appeal to tradition, whether it's fallacious or not, to their argument. They could appeal to tradition or appeal to nature to justify other atrocities. So, like, this is where I essentially make the argument from I think a name for it would be the argument from the tree of behavior. So, like, you can come in from different roots. So it's the same tree, the behavior, but the roots philosophically can go in completely different directions. So two people can eat animal-based products. One person could have Peter Singer's position. Another person could eat a small amount of animals, and they could come to the conclusion that might makes right. Or they can come to the conclusion that it's okay to grape or kill if because it's natural. So, like, and this is where, like, I guess you could say the argument from I think, like, the tree of behavior could essentially, or maybe branch of behavior. I should the argument from I don't know, the argument from behavior for veganism where it would lead to what I would call moral sustainability, where I would just make the argument in the first world, it's not morally sustainable for us to eat animal-based products. Some people will come to the conclusions that they don't really need any justification that demands them to eat these products, if not survive. Like, anyone can come to an insane conclusion when they're consuming these products and paying into atrocities from the comfort of first world pleasure or second world pleasure.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
do you understand what I'm saying?
yeah. No. I agree. He's being an idealist is bad, but the guy in the chat asks a question.
Okay, so let's
Is the active? Well, you can put it on the screen.
Oh,
right?
by the way, 40-Year-Old Vegan has a YouTube channel. Y'all should go check it out. 40-Year-Old Vegan.
Oh,
Okay,
I'm checking it out right now.
yeah, okay. So is the act of killing in itself a rights violation to both human and non? So maybe outside the utilitarianism argument, just a question.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't, or maybe it's not obvious to this guy, but I don't believe in rights.
So he's
but
Chaddie's a
I
utilitarian.
don't know, but I guess a Peter Singer would say no. Cosmic Skeptic doesn't actually have beliefs, so he dodged the question. What do you think, HSD?
Oh, first off, I suspect that Cosmic Skeptic might be taking a whole lot of copium on the weekends. That might be his belief, copium. But yeah, like I think when it comes down to it, is so like if you're a deontologist, I would say like if you're reducing speciesism, I'd say killing is a rights violation to either human and or non-human. Like technically, you could like have a vegan who would say, like, you could have a speciesist vegan or someone who's not a very good vegan, and they could essentially say that they're against killing animals, but they're perfectly fine with killing humans, even if they're vegan because they hate humans, I guess, like in a hypothetical. I wouldn't consider that person a vegan.
Michael,
but
if you remember, Michael Humer actually took the same ridiculous view that Cosmic Skeptic took before he.
I don't know who Michael. I don't know who Michael Humer is.
He's a philosopher. He did an AMA on ARA. That's how I found out about him. He wrote.
Hold on. I want to finish the question if that's okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I was just saying that Michael Humer said that killing a human would be a rights violation, and killing a non-human animal wouldn't. I think that the only people that I've heard take that view are rural utilitarians. So that's why I thought he was one, but I don't really know.
So, like, is a rural utilitarianism like where they value utility under like one specific rule or specific rules?
They say that they determine what the rules are based on which rules will maximize utility, but then breaking those rules is what's wrong. Right? You're not supposed to break those rules. It seems like a very silly position to me.
To me, that just sounds silly. Like, so you have a rule about maximizing.
No. The rule isn't to maximize utility, right? That's how you determine what the rules are. You say, like, okay, what set of rules will maximize utility, and then that's the set of rules that you make. And then breaking those rules, that's what's wrong.
I guess I haven't really heard the reductios or the arguments for rural utilitarianism. I'm not very familiar with it. But yeah, I would say, like, in my opinion, killing a human and a non-human animal is both a rights violation. And I think Chaddie would agree practically it is. Like, practically in the real world, you would generally say killing an animal or human should be a right violation, right?
They should both have legal rights. I don't believe in moral rights, but they should both have similar legal rights in this regard.
Yeah, so I guess, yeah, practically would either mean like what you ideally would hope legally or how you would hope ideally people would conduct and practically. So, but yeah, I think one of the other issues is like, do you there's other ways in which someone could see like for example, if someone believes that like there's certain social contracts, like we should respect social contracts within our community, and for those beings outside of our community, we don't have to treat them with respect. My problem with that is like if someone has that opinion, like you could essentially say it's okay to kill like
ridiculous. Social contract is ridiculous.
Yeah, but I mean, I think like there's some good value to it. I use social contract theory to argue for veganism, but like if you value social contract theory to the point where it is, depending on how you frame it, if you value it to the point where you can kill something like a wild animal because it's not within your contract, then I could also say you could kill someone outside your nation so long as they're not a part of your contract. And in my opinion, it's like all these other silly reductios where you just, at the end of the day, you just sound like you just sound silly, you just sound ridiculous. But yeah, like actually, you chatting for rural utilitarianism. Like, could you give me maybe like an example? Like, how would a ruled utilitarian justify like killing a bunch of animals?
How would they justify that?
Yeah, eating animals or killing them.
I think that any like serious rural utilitarian should be vegan, right? But
How?
you,
Come on, just tell me what they would normally say. What you heard.
I don't think I've ever spoken to someone who's a rural utilitarian and not a vegan, except for I remember Brian Thomasick is not vegan and he's a rural utilitarian, but he's vegetarian. He only eats cheese, and he admits that what he's doing is evil. So
Okay. Yeah, I think with that being said, I think it's time for us to continue. I'm just really disappointed in what Peter Singer said. I honestly don't know. Like, to me, like what he said, my perception is that even if he like finds a way to make everything consistent, he's still no better than a fraud at this point. But yeah, let's continue.
The reason why it's a problem, and I think you're raising something of a non-identity problem here. We've got this situation in which bringing a being into existence, in some sense, requires this negative aspect. In this case, it would be a premature death. And you say something like, well, maybe it would be better to not have that premature death, but if it weren't for the fact that we were going to kill them, they wouldn't exist at all, and they have an overall good life that's worth living, then if those are the options, no life at all, or a life that involves the premature death, what's the problem with favouring the latter? And you say, and as I say, the reason I think this is a problem is because if we look in a human context, it seems that our intuitions are screaming at us that to do this to a human being would be an ethical abomination. To raise human beings, and perhaps you could keep them isolated so they don't know what's going on. Maybe they're in some kind of cult that thinks that once you turn 18 years old, you sort of go into a different realm or something, but you take them through the door and you slice their throats. Maybe you put a bolt through their head first if you're feeling particularly humane. I think people would ridicule this view, especially if it was promoted as a form of humanely killing them, because sure, it's humane in comparison to what we might do on a factory farm, but perhaps compared to what the moral worth of these beings require, to call it humane would be something of a travesty. At least in a human context, I would imagine you would think that would be at least wrong and possibly grossly wrong.
So I think in a human context, it's not possible to avoid spillover effects in terms of the acceptability of killing other humans, and I think that's really the problem there, because we do, as humans, we want to go on living clearly, and if we discover that humans are being killed in this way, that's going to mean that we're going to fear that there'll be less respect for human life and that we will be killed. I think there are consequences because of our consciousness, our awareness, and our understanding of what's going on. For animals, that doesn't generally apply, I think. So I think as you say, the intuitions that we have that scream to us that this is wrong if done for humans.
What he just said there was grossly dead wrong.
which part?
How can he say something so stupid? Our intuitions for animals don't apply to, like, they don't apply as much, but they do apply. Hell, look at the side effects of like killing and slaughterhouse workers. How there's a correlation with violent crime and sexual crime.
I don't know if like what that has to do with what he's saying. Wait,
Let's to take away from behavior. Well, let's put it to philosophy. Like, I've actually known people who literally admitted one of the reasons why they harmed people when they were younger is they thought it's okay to harm beings because of how we treat animals.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let me even further expand upon that. What do people say when they want to harm another human being? Sometimes when someone says they want to kill somebody, they'll say, "I want to slaughter you like a pig."
Gut you like a fish is the archetypal example?
Gut you like a fish or slaughter you like a pig?
I don't think I've ever heard
I've heard slaughter you like a pig. Gut you like a fish is pretty common. Like lambs to the slaughter. So like, bro. Like, how detached do you have to be to not realize that, like, even though it doesn't apply as much, it still applies.
Wait, but
Like,
I don't know if you
yeah,
understand what he's saying.
what is he
Like he's saying the reason that they're different is because they're not capable of understanding that the only reason that it's wrong in the human context is that humans would be afraid of like getting killed, right? And he's saying that's not the case for non-human animals.
Yeah, to an extent, right? Like, we don't have to worry about us being put into the slaughterhouse, or being killed. But I'm saying on a much smaller scale, you have people like Sparage who have admitted on live streams that they've killed and raped. And for the same reason that he justifies eating animals, he justified what he has done.
Mm-hmm.
And then apparently there's even accusations that he's tried to kill his child and his ex-girlfriend. So like,
oh, so you're saying that
I'm going back to, I think what a better word to say is like my argument for different philosophical behaviors. The same behaviors can justify different philosophical positions. I'm going back to that argument, and I'm saying it's nowhere near. We don't need to fear anywhere near as much being harmed in this hypothetical. But to say that we do not have to fear harm is an illusion.
yeah.
It's just
yeah.
to a smaller. It's just to a much smaller degree. And then we don't really have to. And then on top of that, it's not publicized anywhere near as much as like a
Cosmic
slaughterhouse.
Skeptic is going to give a similar or mostly like the opposite kind of critique, but I think it works in the same way. He's going to say like, well, that doesn't really make sense, right? Like it seems like we could pretty easily categorize out these humans in the same way we categorize out non-human animals. And then why would we I mean, if we only kill black people and I'm white, like why would I care about? Why would I be afraid of that? I'm not.
Yeah,
black.
that's it's essentially it, right? Like you're the same reasonings, your same philosophical reasonings can be applied differently with different people with different values. It just. Oh, he said 40-year-old vegan said something. Bite Size Vegan has a great video on what killing does to your brain. I mean, yeah, I've talked quite a bit about like I'm not sure if you heard of Amy Fitzgerald did a good cohort study on the subject. Probably I'll put in the link in the description of this video at the end of it all, or maybe even now. But I've actually researched a bit about this. So not only with perpetration-induced traumatic stress, if I'm pronouncing that properly, a form of PTSD through killing. But on top of that, there's higher rates of suicide, animal to human transmission diseases, which in some studies it is actually shown internationally. Some slaughterhouse workers aren't aware. But then there's on top of that the what is coined a psychological term coined doubling. I'm not sure if it's been taken out of DSM-5 or whatever. It was created by Robert J. Lifton. It was basically where the Nazis had to create a separation of themselves between what they kill, and this is in Jennifer's paper. Between what they kill and who they bring home. So it's creating it's basically creating a psychological separation of yourself. So that way, when you're in certain environments, it triggers a potential separation between who you are, more like an umbrella term for like potential different psychological behaviors and maybe even disorders. Yeah. So like, Yeah. 40-year-old vegan is an ex-federal agent, slaughterhouse inspector. Thank God you went vegan and you're uncensoring this crap. I'm sure you've seen horrors that most people couldn't even imagine. But yeah, like so, and then not only that, but then like the people, like for example, like if there's a correlation with violent crime and sexual crime with slaughterhouse workers to the point where, like looking at 500 different countryside, we see like a correlation with violent crime and sexual crime, and then in a systematic review, there was a correlation with sexual abuse, not violent crime. One of them I found, like I have to ask myself, like, you know, like, is there really a separation? And like you said before, Chaddie, right? It's like, oh shit, one sec.
Oh, the Canadian police are here. See, if it was U.S. police, then they just bust down the door and they shoot him, right? It'd be over for HSD, completely over. But they probably bust down the door and offer him maple syrup or something, and just say it would be really nice if you were to come with us to the prison, but if you don't want to, then sorry for wasting your time. Sorry for wasting your time.
Hey, guys.
What? What was that, HSD? Muted again.
Sorry about that, everyone. Just one sec. Let's continue.
Yeah.
We don't have those about animals, and I think there may be, as I say, reasons why we don't have those about animals. That now you could say, well, that's just because we're speciesist and we use animals without thinking about their interests. But in these conditions that we've been talking about, as I say, I think it's very hard to argue that it is contrary to their interests. So I wouldn't simply say, well, we wouldn't do this to humans, so therefore it must be wrong to do it to animals.
So to be clear, in the situation I described of raising isolated human beings until they're 18 and then killing them secretly, the thing that's wrong about that, in your view, is just the fact that there's a risk that this might cause other human beings to be scared that somehow they're going to get caught up in it. I mean, I can imagine very strict laws in place that unless you were born a member of this particular set of human beings who are bred in particular to be kept isolated and to be bred for food, perhaps for just the sake of our taste pleasure, unless you're a member of that group, you're not allowed to be touched by anybody. You can imagine the laws are incredibly strict on this. And you could say, sure, well, there's a sense in which people might think there's a disrespect for human lives that may one day eventually evolve into a problem for us. But you could say the same thing about animal consumption. You could say, if we're going to begin to recognize a speciesism in the way that we think, and we're kind of okay with killing animals, and shouldn't we be terrified that one day we'll be okay with killing humans too? And we think no, because we've put very strict boundaries around this, not just morally, but also legally, that sure, you can kill a pig, but you can't kill a human being. In this situation where I'm killing human beings early-ish in their lives, say 18 years old, none of the humans who are going to be killed find out. All of the humans who do know about this practice know that they're never going to be a member of that group of people. Is the only thing that could be wrong with that, in your view, just the small risk that sort of something might go wrong there and people might be scared? Is there not something wrong with the killing?
I mean, you also have to say, of course, that these humans would not have existed at all. There's no way in which they would have come into existence, except that they were going to be killed at 18 for some reason.
Yes, to the same extent that an animal on a humane farm, as you describe it, might not have existed unless it was going to be killed for food.
Yeah, I see. I mean, if I think you're describing a situation that is hypothetical to test our intuitions, which is perfectly fine. I don't think that there could be a real world analog of this. But if you say, let's ask that question hypothetically under these circumstances, then I agree. It's very hard for a utilitarian to say why this is wrong, given that these 18-year-olds have good lives that they would not have had otherwise, and we have to assume, of course, that nobody else is harmed by this. So that's another hypothetical thing that we haven't really touched on. Presumably, they have mothers anyway, who might care for them and don't want to be separated from them and want to know what happens. You could say, okay, well, let's assume we've developed we've developed gestation, in a serum or something like that. So they actually have no mothers. We've produced the eggs and the sperm and put them together, and then we grow them in that way. So, if you do all that, then it's difficult for me to say this is intrinsically wrong.
Or I might draw a further analog with the animals and say that these animals also have mothers or children, depending on sort of when they're being killed, who might sort of emotionally depend on each other as well. And you sort of run into potentially the same problems. I mean, a humane beef farm or something is still going to involve killing animals who have relations to other animals that are at least seemingly going to be emotionally distressed by that. But also, I mean, whichever way we sort of make the analogs actually analogous, can you understand why some people would see this as something of a reductio ad absurdum of the utilitarian position? The idea that, yeah, sure, I have an intuition that suffering is bad, and I think that a lot of the strength of utilitarianism comes from that intuition that when we experience suffering, we know that it's bad for us. But we also have a pretty strong intuition that killing humans, even in the conditions that I described, would be wrong. And some people sort of weigh these up and they say, as sensible as utilitarianism seems in the abstract, in principle, if it does lead to such a conclusion, it simply can't be right.
So I don't accept that the judgments that you make under hypothetical circumstances, which are not part of the real world, are a test of the underlying ethical theory, because the judgments we make are those that we have intuitively. You've used the word, our intuitions yourself, that have evolved and developed in circumstances that are part of the real world. And it's very good in the real world that we have this strongly negative intuition that to kill an innocent human being, I would say, unless they strongly request it for some good reason, like they're terminally ill, to kill an innocent human being is wrong. So, it's not that I want to change the intuitions. I'm just saying when you give purely hypothetical examples, they don't refute the underlying theory, because the intuitions are ones that have arisen in circumstances other than the hypothetical ones you've described.
I'm sort of imagining an argument from margin.
Hey, Chaddie, do you have anything you want to say to that?
Yeah, no, yeah. This is the. I mean, I gotta say, Giga Chad moment where Peter Singer's like, yeah, human farm based. I would eat human meat. That's what he's saying. That's kind of a base Giga Chad moment.
I mean, let's be real. Like, drop the jokes for a sec. Like, what is your real perspective on it?
Well, I agree with him, right? If it's utility increasing, but I think that practically, he seems so much more.
He's applying his idealism to like practicality.
Yeah. He's coming off as very speciesist here, because he's so much more willing to like think about the practical issues when it's in a human context, right? And I think that's kind of gross to me, right? Because he's clearly just he's being speciesist here.
I won't lie, I'm getting a little tired. I kind of tuned out for a little bit of it, but I think something that definitely bothered me is like okay, as everyone here, hopefully everyone here has seen Blade Runner. If not, I'll tell you the very premise of like the show or movies. I'm not going to tell you the plot. Basically, have you seen Blade Runner, Chaddie?
I've never seen it, but
I highly recommend it. No, I'm not going to spoil it. So, okay. Blade Runner is a great movie. I would say both Blade Runners are philosophical masterpieces. But basically, the very concept of it is that humans are being created artificially. So they're created. They're basically they're created in a lab. And if they're created in a lab, they're called replicants. They don't behave exactly like humans, but they're technically our same biology. But more or less, these humans do not have rights. Mm-hmm. And over the generations, they create different replicants. And replicants are stronger, they're faster, but there is a problem. The problem is that these replicants also have emotions, they also have logic, and humans in this hypothetical enslave them. And these replicants, obviously not every single replicant is going to be fine with being enslaved.
Of course. What happened?
So yeah, sorry about that. Basically, so in this hypothetical, right, when we're talking about Blade Runner. One sec, you just talked, Chaddie. One sec.
Yeah, Blade Runner. Never seen it.
Yeah, sorry about this. There's just some things going on. So basically, so when it comes to the subject, right, when we're talking about the subject of Blade Runner, essentially my huge issue with everything Peter Singer's saying here is
that's a cliffhanger.
So my huge issue is that you could essentially adopt a position where you take away personhood from, or you could take away the same consideration you would give your neighbor, your friend, and just the harsh reality is not everyone's going to be utilitarian and value utility like you, Peter Singer. If someone is willing to farm a human being or a cow in a grass-fed farm, some of them might just not care about the animal suffering in general. So everything he's saying to me just sounds so stupid. And it's why do humans matter so much more in comparison to animals? couldn't it be the case that animals feel more pain than humans to begin with?
Yeah,
So
possible.
why do we have this notion that if we harm humans, it's a greater utility decrease inherently? Like it's
I don't know if Peter Singer said that. He's talking about killing in particular, but
no, it's like he never said that, I know, but like I'm saying, why do people have this? Why do people like it to me? It seems so silly when a utilitarian seems to have like this greater concern for humans. To me,
I agree. And you know what? Well, they're not always utilitarians. I remember Ask Yourself had a similar view. I asked him about it, and yeah, kind of gross.
so yeah, the happy police in Ontario pulled me out of my car prior to a Meet the Victims event, put 6 of us in jail overnight.
Yeah, while you were gone, I was talking about how Canadian police they wouldn't be like as bad as American police.
I mean, I don't know.
I guess maybe not. Maybe
what
Canadian
proof you
police aren't
have.
bad.
Well, they might just they might give you some maple syrup when they arrest you, but besides that,
that is what I said. I said that they give you maple syrup. Oh my goodness.
So yeah, but basically like yeah, it's really ridiculous how far the state will simp for animal agriculture.
Really disgusting.
But realistically, like the thing is the state makes so much money off of these products that even though it's bad for the environment, even though we elect
I don't think the state makes money off of the state.
Yeah, it
loses
does.
money.
No,
The politicians get money. That's
what I mean to say. No. The state makes money. So when I mean the state, I'm referring to we could say politicians. When I'm referring to the state, I'm referring to the political party in power. So the state makes money. The political parties in power, they make money off of actually, no, I think it'd be more correct for me to say politicians. Yeah, the politicians make money off of animal agriculture. So a lot of them will defend animal agriculture. There's a pre-existing lobby. There's pre-existing jobs, even if they're less efficient jobs. And then on top of that, society has a huge emotional bias towards these products to begin with. It's
animal agriculture bad.
Yeah, no, it's just really sad to see the level of corruption when it comes to how we deal justice. Like, what did they even arrest you for? Like, what? Like, it's so stupid. Like, what did you do wrong? Like, what law did you break? What was their justification? Like, could you even sue? Like, yeah. So this guy, for anyone listening, he was a federal inspector for slaughterhouses, and basically he was arrested when he went to a Meet the Victims events, which I'm assuming is for slaughterhouse workers. It's just.
I thought he said right before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Happy Police Ontario pulled me out of the car prior to Meet the Victims. Okay, whatever. I misworded. Whatever. So yeah, like, do you want to continue listening to Peter Singer? Mute up.
Yeah. Let's continue.
Cases that might be put forward here. It's interesting. I mean, you're the person who popularized the term speciesism in many people's account. And speciesism is something like the unwarranted differential treatment or discrimination on the basis of species alone. It seems to me that if you can imagine a world, as you write in this interview, in which people sometimes enjoy the luxury of humanely killed animals from a humane farm, but you can't imagine the same thing for human beings. You say that there's sort of a practical reason why you think that human scenario could never occur. But suppose it was on a very strict metric. Suppose it was something to do with mental capacity. Let's imagine that if a human being is born with such a limited cognitive capacity that they essentially don't have any self-awareness, or they sort of just don't know what's going on, or there's some kind of cognitive test that we install that says that if you're below a certain cognitive ability, if the mother consents, if the parents consent, then we're able to kill these. Suppose we find that they taste really, really nice, and there's sort of a luxury meat market for these disabled children. Perhaps some parents are intentionally having these children, and we say, look, you don't need to fear that this is going to affect our general view of killing other human beings, because this only applies to a very strict set of human beings that were intentionally created for this purpose, have very limited cognitive capacities. Even if we could imagine such a world, I think we would imagine it with some disgust. But I don't think there's a way to picture that world with disgust. But picture a world in which we're killing humanely raised animals with no problem, without committing ourselves to some charge of speciesism.
Well, I don't agree with that, because, as you said, one speciesism is the unwarranted discrimination against beings on the basis of their species. So the question of what's warranted and what isn't is obviously there, but it's not in any case. In the case that I'm talking about, I think it's not the species that's doing the work. It's the lack of awareness of the circumstances on the part of the being. And if you're saying, well, this could apply to human beings, again, hypothetically under some circumstances, yeah, it could. But that, then we've again stepped into this hypothetical realm where I don't think our intuitions are decisive in saying whether this is right or wrong.
Yeah.
Cope.
Yeah.
Cope.
Yeah, it sounds like
Copium.
copium. I actually agree.
Copium. Yeah,
It's being speciesist.
Peter Singer is a drug addict on copium.
No, you know what he really is? He's a boomer. He doesn't get the new generation with all the new fancy ethics. He's stuck in he's basically like my dad. My dad's he's over 60, so he's racist. If you're over 60, you have to be racist. There's no escaping, and it's the same thing here.
I mean, I guess what I mean is copium. So one of the problems is when you create the threshold of consciousness for basically a higher consideration for sentient being, to the point where you can essentially enslave or slaughter a sentient being at the end of their life for pleasure, or commodify them for pleasure, and to value a sentient being less than their use, and to value their use more than the sentient being. The problem there is that anyone could say something. Anyone can create anyone can use a spectrum where if somebody fits within a certain spectrum, that they will consider that sentient being more to justify a pre-existing prejudice. For example, a racist could say that only people with they could create a preference. For example, somebody wants to let's say on average, Asian people are shorter in comparison to African people. Someone who's African who's racist to Asians might say, I believe that people who should come to our country should be this tall. Here are my reasons. Here's how it helps society. They can make up whatever bullshit they want. But at the end of the day, it could just be an argument to already justify a pre-existing bias. So when Peter Singer is saying unwarranted, my problem with that is Jesus, a racist could believe that racism is warranted because, let's say, certain minorities might create more crime. Therefore, we shouldn't allow these minorities to move into our nations. I mean, all he's done is he's selected a trait that favors one species while claiming he's not speciesist. Holy crap. People consider this guy to be a famous philosopher. He sounds like a gymnast. Jesus goddamn Christ. Why is it?
Does it worse, right? And what
he does what worse?
His anthropocentric view that intelligence is valuable.
Well, I do value intelligence, but how invaluable is it? Is it if you said I'd rather save a human than a cow that's drowning, okay, fine. Now, if someone said I'm fine with eating a cow so long as it got to live a nice life before it was humanely slaughtered, something that is much more comedic. Those are two different things. What is Ask Yourself's view? What is his perspective?
Well, his view, it seems to me, when I talk to him, his view is just that intelligence is valuable in itself. Regardless of I would say intelligence is instrumentally valuable. Obviously, if I were less intelligent, I would be less capable of achieving my goals. But Ask Yourself would say to kill someone is not as bad if they're not as intelligent. Right? Like their life, their well-being, and their suffering and such is less valuable if they're less intelligent.
I don't even understand why we value that. Like I would just simply say there is some value to having an in-group preference. Like when I mean in-group, I mean like when it comes to the practicality of surviving. Simple as that. But like in theory,
Practice sounds like some Nazi stuff. I'm going to be frank with you, HSD.
Oh,
in-group preference, it's evil.
I mean, not necessarily. Like for example, if let's say I wanted to, like, there's two politicians. One politician wants to help with foreign aid. One doesn't. So let's say like the one politician who doesn't want to help with foreign aid. Let's just say like the politician who helped. Let's just say the politician who wanted help with foreign aid. He ended up giving it to some corrupt politician in Africa. The money didn't really go to help the people. Most of the money. Having a preference to help your own community isn't inherently a bad thing. There's a reason why we have taxes to fund our own communities and not a community, not every community equally in the world. Like, do you know what I'm saying, Chaddie?
The reason for that isn't because they're all philosophers that sat down and thought about it. The reason is because why would the government just give all their money to Africa, but they could keep it for themselves?
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, from a practical standpoint, for a survival of a society, like having some level of in-group preference and acting within their own self-interest, even though it can lead to terribly insane conclusions at times, and maybe even cruel conclusions. Sometimes it can lead to really rational conclusions where they're not easily taken advantage of, and or exploited. So, like
If all you're saying is that,
being selfish isn't always inherently a bad thing.
Like acting in a way that benefits yourself isn't always a bad thing. But I would say being selfish is always a bad thing. Because to be selfish is to value your own well-being or your own something over other people's.
Well, like, if I can't take care of myself, how could I take care of others? So it depends on what you mean by selfish.
Then you're justifying
benefiting
yourself by saying if you benefit yourself, then you'll be better able to benefit other people.
Yeah, so this is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, I would say it is. I would say it easily could be. Like, I could value helping myself over other people because I'd better be able to help. How can I help myself if I don't help others? But on top of that, I could also easily say, if I go too far in my way to help other people, I could be taken advantage of. And if I'm taken advantage of, I might be allowing other people to take advantage of me. So when I'm saying, like, people acting within their own self-interest, to me that sounds more rational and sane. Now, what was Peter Singer saying again? Oh, yeah. Or like, sorry, ask yourself's perspective of valuing sentience. Valuing intelligence more. Like, don't get me wrong, I do value intelligence, but like, to what, I don't know, like, I do value it as well, but it's like, I guess it's like, to what extent, right? I guess I would have to hear, like, ask yourself's perspective. Maybe I would agree with them, maybe I would disagree with them. But it's, I don't know, I just think intelligence is a little overrated. Because, like, I value dogs in some ways a bit more than I do humans, because dogs are loyal, they're kind, they're caring.
I don't think dogs are kind, but
well, no, they're kind if we raise them to be. Like, I'm saying, like, dogs are very caring, loyal animals. Humans are very manipulative, humans are very manipulative and Machiavellian. Humans can be very, very two-faced. So I mean, like, it's just when people say that they value intelligence, or like intelligence is what determines whether they value another being more, I just find it kind of silly to like But then again, I would have to hear how. Ask yourself, like,
I'm going to be
I might disagree with them. I might agree with them. But yeah.
HSD. I'm going to be act to act with you. If I were a virtue ethicist, I would see loyalty as a negative virtue. Like, loyalty is clearly terrible.
I don't know. I don't think we'd see eye to eye on that one.
But
So,
loyalty
if I backstab my friend for more money, is that a good thing?
well, it depends what you're using the money for, right? If you give it to charity, and your friend would, but well, there's no reason to say that there's no reason to say that your friend's well-being is worth more than 100 children starving in Africa, right? Like, why would?
Like, I can understand that perspective to an extent, but I'm just saying, like, a lot of human beings will usually betray someone simply for their own pleasure, and they will betray their loyalty.
That's not an issue of loyalty. That's an issue of selfishness. I'll say selflessness is certainly would be a virtue if I believed in virtues.
Yeah, but I think I think the reason to care for others and to be loyal to others can actually make someone also less selfish. Like, loyalty can inspire people to be less selfish.
Well, loyalty literally is just in-group bias. That's all it is.
Yeah, but this is just where I disagree with you. Like, for example, if I wasn't a loyal person, I'm not sure if I would have had the compassion to expand to veganism eventually. Like, if I wasn't a loyal person,
that doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, yeah, that's because different people value different things. Sometimes loyalty, your in-group preference, for example, the fact that you care about another being other than yourself, your loyalty to another being other than yourself can inspire someone to expand their moral consideration. Like, for example, if I wouldn't eat my dog, and if I had a dog, in a hypothetical, if I lived with my dog, and if I was a carnist, and if I was a very loyal person, and if someone told me for the same reasons I could justify killing a pig, I could justify killing a dog, that might pull at someone's heartstrings, because that intuition that's telling them to be loyal to their dog might also cause them to care about the suffering of animals. So I don't see loyalty as inherently always I understand what you're saying. Loyalty can be it can be like a utility obstacle, but I would say loyalty generally can be a great, a huge booster to utility. And I think your calculus is misunderstands how other people see loyalty, how other people experience it emotionally, like myself. Like, I might not be.
You're right. I'm too much of a sociopath to experience something as crazy as loyalty. So I wouldn't be able to understand it.
I hope you didn't take it that way.
No, I'm not saying that you said that. I'm just saying that that's the case.
Yeah, I think, just think of it like this, right? Imagine
you're not offending me, HSD.
Yeah, but
I'm saying I'm saying I'm a sociopath. I'm not saying that sarcastically.
Yeah, but do you see how someone who might be willing to betray their cat or dog and eat them, how that person might, if they didn't have a sense of loyalty, that person might just become more selfish. That person might not become selfless. For some people, loyalty can inspire selflessness. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, you know what? Maybe I'm extra cynical for loyalty because I just watched The Last of Us. I don't know if you're familiar. Maybe I shouldn't spoil that.
No. No spoilers.
Oh my goodness, it's
you spoil. I will smash you, bro. I will
You should.
Oh God, that sounded wrong. That sounded wrong. This isn't this. Oh no.
I'm telling you to watch the show. It's great. It's amazing. And then come back to me about loyalty.
Yeah, I think no. Don't get me wrong. Loyalty can be a bad thing. It can allow one person to value their own in group to the point where they allow, for utility standpoint, loyalty can allow one person to allow billions of people to die just to protect their best friend. But at the
Anyway,
same
we can continue.
time, it can inspire so much more compassion. But yeah, let's continue. So let's mute up.
Yeah, I mean, I think people listening will perhaps see what you're saying and understand why it's difficult to condemn as a utilitarian this treatment of humans in the hypothetical scenario. And as you say, this is a hypothetical just to test our intuitions. But I suppose what I'm trying to do is figure out what it is that's wrong. And I just want to make sure that I'm understanding you correctly. In the situation of killing human beings early on in their lives, is the thing that's wrong with it the sort of knock-on effects this is going to have psychologically on other human beings? Is it, in other words, not wrong for the person being killed?
It's okay. So
not bad. I
yes,
should say.
basically the reason it's wrong is the knock-on psychological effects. Is it wrong for the person being killed as part of an overall practice where the person being killed would not have existed if that person were not going to be killed at some relatively early age, and if the life that the person has is a good one up to that point, then I would have to say that the overall practice is not wrong for the person being killed. The person couldn't complain because the response would be, you wouldn't have even existed and you've enjoyed the years that you had. So we haven't wronged you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm presuming if you asked the person in question, sort of, have you had a good life? Would you rather have not been born at all? They would probably say that they'd rather be born and undergo that experience. But as I say, in the context of the non-identity problem, the reason this is referred to as a problem is because for most people, there does still seem to be something wrong with this. And Parfit imagines that we have a few intuitions and we essentially have to abandon one of them. We either have to abandon the idea that you can somehow, I mean, he says that you must, in order to harm someone, you must leave them worse off. That's one intuition that we have. Another intuition is situations like this where we kill human beings who otherwise wouldn't have existed at all is wrong. And I think there's one other. And he essentially says, look, these all seem intuitively true, but we have to abandon one of them. And I guess for most people, they probably abandon one of the other ones. But it's interesting to hear you just where we kill human beings, a few intuitions, and we essentially have to abandon one of them. We either have to abandon the idea that you can somehow, I mean, he says that you must, in order to harm someone, you must leave them worse off. That's one intuition that we have. Another intuition is situations like this where we kill human beings who otherwise wouldn't have existed at all is wrong. And I think there's one other. And he essentially says, look, these all seem intuitively true, but we have to abandon one of them. And I guess for most people, they probably abandon one of the other ones. But it's interesting to hear you just, I guess not abandon because you might not share that intuition, but to bite that bullet.
Yeah, I would bite that bullet. You're quite right. I mean, I think there is some intuition that has to go, and I'm going to stick with the one that says, to have harmed you, we have to have made you worse off than you would otherwise have been.
I guess that in a sentence is the rejoinder to this position of exploitation or anti-utilitarian sentiment that says there's still something wrong or there's still something harmful or bad about these practices, even if they don't inflict any suffering. And what you just said there, that in order to harm, you must leave someone worse off. You can't harm somebody by making them better off overall. You can't. Well, you can maybe overall in the long run, but you can't inflict a harm that leaves someone better off than they were otherwise. Or maybe you can.
Well, than they would otherwise have been, I think is what you have to say, because
yes,
maybe you could have made them much better off, or they could have been much better off, but you stopped them being much better off.
Yeah, and of course you can sort of harm people in one instance that makes them better off overall, but in that specific instance of harming, to say that you've committed an act which makes them better off in every metric and somehow still harm them seems, again, intuitively wrong. One thing I did want to ask you about is how far, or in which contexts you apply this rule about considering our effects on suffering. I mean, one of the things that you're famed for is taking what
I really misjudged this thumbnail. I should like immediately change this thumbnail to the point where I put Peter Singer on Cosmic Skeptic's side.
Damn,
I have to change. I'm changing this thumbnail. Like fuck Peter Singer.
Yeah, but you can't deny what he said. In order to, well, you can.
No, it's not that. It's just like it really annoys me, this idealism. Like it's the matter of entertaining like normative, like when people talk about normative ideals without considering the practical applications. Okay, couldn't I just as easily say that like if there was a hypothetical where people talked about normative hypotheticals for justifying certain like rights violations, if it is the case that it doesn't actually help increase utility, entertaining the idea if it decreased utility, would it be a bad action?
Yeah, that is something to think about. Yeah, because I was gonna say this or I was thinking about this is like, even if it is the case that your free range eggs or whatever aren't bad, if you go onto the internet and say free range eggs aren't bad, people will just buy eggs.
Yes, that's my whole point.
Like,
you might be thinking of like some certain hypothetical, but you also have to be very, very, very you have to be very conscious with how that's going to be interpreted. Like, Jesus, I may as well put Alex on our side at this point.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, like I think Cosmic Skeptic here is just playing devil's advocate.
I
Yeah,
don't think
I
he's a
mean,
utilitarian, and I don't
uh,
think he has been for a long time. But
holy,
I agree that he's
holy,
playing devil's advocate. But
yeah, I really, Jesus, I really should not have. I trusted you when you said my boy. He pushes Peter Singer, my boy Peter Singer. Like, holy, Peter Singer is not my boy. Peter Singer's an asshole. Why did I
That's
trust
true.
you for the comments? Oh no,
I didn't watch the video. I just remember that
no.
he bit the bullet on all this utilitarian stuff. Maybe you still wouldn't want to say my boy because utilitarianism is crazy.
No, my guy, but ever seems to fight Peter Singer. Like, it really seems strange to me, actually, at the end of it all. Like, he seems to, like, give so much more pushback to Peter Singer. Yet when we actually look at how he treated Mikhaila Peterson when they had the discussion, he didn't give any pushback. Like, or at least he gave such little pushback that it just felt like he was mostly just nodding his head. Like, like why wasn't he, like, he could have gave so much more reductios and pushback. Like, it just...
Yeah, Mikhaila Peterson's worse than Peter Singer. That's
yeah,
what
but
I'm
like I think honestly, like I'm in shock. Like I thought Peter Singer, everyone was saying all these good things about Peter Singer. Oh, you know, he's a
really?
good
No, I only hear bad things about Peter Singer.
Oh, he created the Animal Liberation. It was such a good book. Like was it a piece of
I
shit
think
book?
Animal Liberation is a good book. Like I think that even like non-utilitarians would say it's a good book because he doesn't say utilitarianism's true, therefore you should go vegan. He gives more intuitive arguments, like the argument from marginal cases.
I mean, I don't know, man. Would I read that book and wipe it with my ass? That is the question. Like, it's just the things that he's saying right now. It's
Yeah, pretty cringe when he was.
I'm just at a loss for words. Like how does he say something like how do you call yourself a philosopher, promote animal liberation, you talk about, you know, trying to increase well-being, while at the same time you're going on to a podcast and you're saying it's under certain situations it's okay to buy free range if you like look at how they were raised, and if you call the farm
No, this was crazy. He was saying,
like
if
a
it was
farm could easily
500
lie.
per hectare or less, 500 per hectare or less, then you're good. Oh my goodness,
It's
crazy.
yeah. You know, it's like, what was it? I have a study. It was from it was under David Suzuki's one of his organizations. It looked at the very common, the most popular certification for seafood. What was it? What was the most common certification? So what they found was what was it? What they found was, with the most common certification, I can't remember what it's called. It was in Seaspiracy, the name of the certification. One sec, for seafood.
RSPCA.
I think it's like I think it's MSC. I think it's called.
Never heard of that.
No. Yeah. So basically, anyways, I actually I'm not sure. Was it Sea Choice? Yeah. So that's Sea Choice. Yeah. Okay. So I think it's called the I got it right here. The Marine Stewardship Council. I think that's what MSC. Yeah, Marine Stewardship Council. I think that's what it is. I think they're the most common. I could be wrong. I think they're the most common, or one of the most common seafood certifications. David Suzuki's foundation looked into it, and what they found, one of his charities, what they found was, and I'm going to make a video on that eventually over time. They actually found that not all the factory farms lived up to their standard. Like, anyone could write down on a fucking milk carton that it's certified. The state could tell you it's certified. You know, let's just say like one study found that they were all following industry standard. At any point, any of those industries could cheat or lie. Like you never really, unless you actually are watching them, like you live right next to them or you visit that farm regularly, you never really know what they get to live through. And even if you do, you're never there 24/7. So the fact that he even say something like that, like the fact that he's talking about these ideal normatives without actually giving like a context to saying that this isn't really the best justification for you to eat these products. But then again, he can't even say that because he brought up it's okay to bring them into existence so long as they get to live good lives. Then why even write a book called Animal Liberation? What are you liberating them from? Like, I'm repeating myself. Do you have anything you want to say? Chaddie, you have anything you want to say?
Yeah, just liberating them from the gestation crates. That's what he meant by liberation.
Liberating them from what?
Gestation crates, but that's about it. You know what those are, right?
Yeah, you know, we should liberate black people. Like, geez, you know, we have a bunch of black people in the United States. We should imagine if someone said in a hypothetical, you know, they should not have been, you know, it would be okay for us to, we could still own them as slaves. We just have to give them better working standards, you know, not hurt them, not whip them, and liberate them from not having a roof over their head. But so long as they're born into this category, which white people are not, then it's fine. We can treat them that way.
Yep.
Like his arguments just justify species. Like his arguments can justify speciesism. It can justify racism, justify sexism.
Well, yeah. I think we should continue.
Jesus,
It's almost
Okay.
over.
yeah.
Many people see as quite a radical approach to charity, for example, in saying that, you know, we should be giving a lot more to charity, and it might be wrong for me to, you know, you can sort of sit and have some cocktails in a bar, as I've done before. I've recently, I remember being in a cocktail bar, and when we looked at the bill and we thought, oh gosh, you know, I pulled up the Life You Can Save, and you have a calculator on there where you can put in an amount of money and choose a charity, and it will give you exact metrics on exactly what you could have bought. This many mosquito nets to fight against malaria. You could have dewormed this many children. And I thought, my gosh, you know, and there's some real power there. I don't know. I mean, do you think it's wrong of me to have bought those cocktails?
I think it would have been better if you donated the money to effective charities, as those recommended by the Life You Can Save, for example. But I'm not going to blame you because I'm not a saint myself. It's not that I don't ever spend money on things that I could have done more good with by donating to effective charities. I think the problem is that the standard in the world as a whole is very, very low in terms of what we give or what we regard as an acceptable amount to give to charity. And so you can greatly exceed that standard, as I myself do. You know, I give much more than the average in the community by, you know, many factors. But I could still be doing more. So the question is, how should I think of myself? Should I think of myself that I'm a bad person because I could be doing more than I am doing, and therefore I shouldn't spend money? I'm not a cocktail drinker myself, but there are other things, let's say, that I might spend money on that I could put to better uses. How hard should I be on myself when I'm giving a substantial portion of my income to effective charities, but not quite as much as I really ought to be?
Yeah,
that's kind of.
I remember discussing in a video once how after reading The Life You Can Save and Family, Affluence and Morality, I remember sort of like I'd be like shaving my face, and I thought to myself, well, like, you know, I need to buy a razor in order to shave my face, and in theory, like my facial hair could never be as important as the life of a suffering child somewhere across the globe. But it seemed to me that to say that I was therefore somehow I sort of had to pause as to whether it's ethical for me to buy a razor to shave my face, because in theory I could just grow out my beard, look a bit disheveled, and it probably wouldn't affect my career or social prospects that much. And even if it did, why should that be more important than the life of another human being? And I thought maybe the fact that I'm stopping to think whether it's ethical to shave my face, again, maybe tells me that there's something wrong with this whole utilitarianism business.
Well, I don't think it tells you there's something wrong with the whole utilitarian business, but it does tell you that we need to take some sort of, I guess, not try too hard to be perfect in every detail, because, you know, that way lies madness. It's just very difficult to live that way.
But I mean, you'll notice that in the context of eating food and veganism, people often draw a strict line, and it sounds like you sort of you have some lenience for free range eggs and humanely raised animal products or this kind of thing. But somebody who just sort of occasionally buys factory farmed meat, just for the hell of it, vegans will look at that person and say that they've sort of committed this moral abomination. I mean, I don't know if you'll share that view, but people say sort of there's like this line in the sand. Whereas when it comes to like buying cocktails, when you could have donated the money to charity, we say, well, no one's perfect, we're not saints, we can't live up to our ethical standards. But it is still true that I could have not bought those cocktails and I could have donated the money to charity. It seems like there's almost less. I don't know.
I mean, one is grayer because there's just an infinite number of amounts of money that you could spend on a whole range of different things, and there's no clear line to be drawn. Whereas vegans will say there is a clear line to be drawn. Although, in fact, when you look at it more closely, I don't think there is such a clear line to be drawn because, of course, as has been argued by opponents of veganism, when you eat crops, there are animals that are killed in order to protect those crops or to harvest those crops. And anybody who grows veggies, and I do grow some vegetables myself whenever I get the opportunity, will know that that's true. It's extremely hard to protect your crops from some animals. Now, maybe you can protect them from vertebrates by netting, but certainly slugs and snails are going to get through, and what are you going to do with them? And maybe they're sentient. We certainly can't say with confidence that we know they're not sentient. So there's no absolute purity in terms of what you eat and saying, I'm not harming any animals at all by what I'm eating. So I think there are grey lines, and those vegans who point the finger at somebody who occasionally eats something that is an animal, or even under some circumstances eats something that's factory farmed, I think that's a kind of puritanical insistence on a clear line, when we should really be thinking about what are the consequences of what this person is doing. What are they doing in the rest of their life? Are they generally avoiding contributing to factory farming? Are they generally contributing significant resources to help people in extreme poverty? And we should be a bit more tolerant, I think, rather than saying, no, you ordered cocktails that you didn't need, you're a bad person, or you ate some food that was an animal product, therefore you're a bad person.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd like to interject.
Yeah, go ahead.
The fluctuation of currency within an economy, and the amount of spending within an economy also boosts the dollar of that economy. So if everyone donated and if there wasn't as much spending, the value of charity would go down as well. So the value of charity of what you donate is dependent on the economic prospect of the nation that you're in. So I could just as easily say that when I donate $20, I could donate more money, but I could also say that I'm technically also boosting the value. Like, I'm saying if everyone in an ideal society donated more money, then that would be less money being spent within that economy. Like, if everyone donated all their money.
Yeah, but I don't think that we're ever going to reach a point where
I know. So I'm not saying so technically for someone
practically.
Stop. So I think practically speaking, and normally just in theory, I don't think if someone wants to spend a lot of money on charity, I don't think they should be discouraged, because I don't think it's going to have a huge effect on your economy. But I'm saying if everyone was to do that, I could see a problem with that. But it was just something that kind of went through my head. Chaddie, I think the other thing, I think 40-year-old vegan said futility, really. What point were you referring to? Because I was kind of just watching the video.
I think it was Peter Singer saying the crops, though. Yeah, I don't think that he really gave an argument from futility in the real sense, though. Usually the traditional crops, though, argument is clearly an argument from futility, but his is more so what is it, the puddle versus lake thing, or heap of sand or not, where we can't have clear definitions.
I think one of my issues with what Peter Singer. The other thing too is I think lifting vegan logic said. Jesus, I said lifting vegan gains. Lifting vegan logic actually made an argument that when you we don't know if we don't know if crop deaths decrease or increase utility. So yeah, that's another thing I want to bring up. So do you want to say anything, Chaddie? Because actually I should finish that. Basically, there's a possibility there's more suffering in the wild than there is when humans grow crops. For all we know, when we grow crops, there's actually less suffering. Because technically, when you think about it, when you destroy an entire ecosystem,
no, I agree with you.
Yeah, if you genocide an entire ecosystem, and if we grow crops so we can survive, the suffering that's left over could be drastically less than if it was completely wild. But Chaddie, do you want to say something?
I remember I watched Joey's review of this, and he said that's what he said. I think they haven't talked about crops.
Maybe
Maybe
genocide is a bit hyperbolic, but like if we completely destroy an ecosystem to create our own crop, or maybe not ecosystem, but if we completely remove wildlife, or if we just basically created a bunch of crops, like would it increase or decrease utility?
Maybe we want to wait until after they talk about this, because I think Cosmic Skeptic is about to ask him about like people who eat more crops or whatever.
Okay, I'll mute up.
That is what I was going to ask you about, that some people will say, look, when it comes to eating animal products, there's a very clear line here. You either sort of eat them or you don't, and you can eat a plant-based alternative. The charity stuff, it seems to go on potentially forever. But as you point out, animals killed in crop production means that any food that you eat is going to produce some form of animal suffering and death. And you might say that it's impossible to measure exactly how much food we should be eating. I mean, you could say that because animals are being killed in crop production, it's immoral to eat a single calorie over your absolute maintenance level, but that would be very difficult to maintain. But then in some circumstances, people do intentionally eat more calories. That is, I mean, I was thinking about bodybuilders, for example, and you have a lot of vegan bodybuilders who make a point of trying to put on as much muscle as possible to prove to the world that it's possible to be a vegan bodybuilder and have a lot of muscle mass. And you think, okay, great, but in order to put on muscle, you need to intentionally enter a caloric surplus. That means you need to intentionally, not just sort of by chance, because you don't really, you're tracking every calorie and you say, every day I'm going to eat sort of 300-400 calories, sometimes many more, over the amount that I know I need to survive and be healthy. And we do this in order to then, go to the gym and put on muscle. And I think to myself, well, okay, as a vegan, if you think that, at least somebody who justifies their veganism in a similar way to you, in saying that this is unnecessary death of animals that don't need to die for food that we don't need to eat to be healthy, I think that in the case of a vegan bodybuilder, if you intentionally go into a caloric surplus, then what you're doing is you're paying for food that results in the death and suffering of animals that's not necessary for you to eat in order to be healthy. And again, this isn't because you're sort of like, oh, I couldn't practically work out exactly how many calories I need. You're intentionally eating more than you know you need to be healthy. But it seems to me that if you present a vegan with such a vegan bodybuilder, they wouldn't say, look, you're committing this moral abomination on the level of, eating animal products. Of course, it's not going to be factory farming, so the suffering's probably going to be worse. But whereas a vegan might say that eating a humanely raised cow or grass-fed beef, something like this, is still wrong, I don't see that same kind of energy being presented to a vegan bodybuilder. I wonder what you think about that, and whether you think on a utilitarian basis, if somebody is intentionally eating a caloric surplus, is that an unethical thing to do?
I think it depends why they're doing it. If they're doing it to show that vegans can be strong in the hope that therefore more people will switch to a vegan diet, I think that's fine. That's a good reason, and assuming that this actually might work, of course, it has some reasonable chance of working. That's a justification. If they're doing it because they really enjoy having that kind of body, well, I would be somewhat tolerant of that, because, as I said, and I think we all do things that are not just geared to producing the best possible world that we could because we enjoy them. And I'm certainly not saying that nobody should relax for a moment from working hard for the greatest possible benefit of everyone. I think that's an absurdly demanding standard that is likely to be counterproductive if you actually try to hold people to it. But, I'm not sure exactly what the motivation of the vegan bodybuilder you're talking about is. But yeah, in general, I think we should try to consume, we should try to cut back on our unnecessary consumption of items. And you're open to criticism if you're consuming unnecessary calories, just as you're open for criticism if you're producing, driving let's say you're driving a car that produces greenhouse gases and you're driving unnecessary distances to do that. That's all. There's a lot of things that we're open to criticism for, and I think we have to look at the whole picture of how someone is living and not try to pick on, oh, you've stepped over some line here.
Yeah, I mean, of course, cars emissions are often brought up, but I think that we're consistent in our treatment of animals and humans. We know that by driving cars, environmental pollution is going.
I actually thought of an argument against this position I haven't thought of before. You there, Chaddie?
Yeah.
If someone is intentionally entering a vegan surplus, and if they're buying lots of vegan food, then I could just as easily also make the argument that they are also adding more of a demand for vegan products. So thus making it easier for them to compete in the market. So if all vegans ate in a caloric deficit, that could potentially drastically hurt the vegan movement as well, because that might hurt the amount of demand for vegan products. What's your thoughts on that? Thoughts?
Yeah, so the only way in which I would see that like working out is that if you weren't eating like whole foods or whatever, it would have to be like you're eating specifically like vegan alternatives. Because if someone eats like a whole bunch of extra apples or whatever, then I don't think that that's going to be like that's going to create like really good competition
Actually,
for animal products.
I think, so I'd agree and disagree. So like, basically, let's say if the amount of people who consume plants that are ethical vegans increase, it does increase the market. For example, even restaurants, like when you go out to eat and you try to eat as much caloric surplus as possible, even if it's completely whole foods, you're increasing the demand for vegan products in a market. And when we're talking about buying
increasing the demand, like it's not that vegan products, I guess, other than what already exists with regards to like, okay, maybe farmland is better than wildland. Vegan products aren't good; they're just neutral.
Yeah,
And then
that's
so like when you make more of those on the shelves, that's only good if it results in more people that wouldn't have otherwise, or who would otherwise have bought like meat instead, like choosing to buy this.
Yeah,
But
that's what I'm saying. So you go.
but if you're like eating rice and beans, I don't think that there are going to be a lot of omnis who see more rice and beans on the shelves and say like, okay, well, let
That's
me buy this instead.
that's where I disagree, actually. So like, and I'm to an extent I agree, to an extent I disagree. So like, if you go out to a restaurant, and if let's say every vegan's eating a caloric surplus, when they go out to eat, they're gonna want to eat more plant-based food. So let's say they order 2 plant-based meals, and if the restaurants notice that they're getting a lot more sales in plant-based foods, they might be more likely to add more things to their menu. Like if every vegan just ate the bare minimum to survive and were scrawny, I think it would hurt the market. So I'm saying even if it was whole foods, we're also increasing the amount of people that are eating plants that are ethical. Sorry, we'd also be increasing the demand for, and also increasing the demand for, let's say, beans and rice. Like in a big city, I see the problem. But as these companies become bigger, these companies that are selling to humans, the possibility of them also trying to market to having the finances to market to other parts of the world might also increase. So no, even though I'd agree with you, it's better. Increasing demand for vegan alternatives is probably better. I would also say increasing demand for vegan products in general is good. Because just like there's a possibility it is good, is a better way to say it from a utility standpoint.
Yeah, so I guess specifically, I mean, I'm not. What we're disagreeing on is not whether or not increasing demand is good. You're saying that, like, if you increase the demand for this product by buying it, that will result in a further increase in demand, like from other people who wouldn't otherwise have bought it.
Potentially.
That's what I'm.
Like, for example, let's say if restaurants, like if people were eating a caloric surplus and they were trying to eat as much vegan products as possible. So let's say they order 2 meals at a restaurant. Restaurants, if they're getting more sales for vegan products, they might be more likely to introduce more vegan alternatives. And maybe a non-vegan will try it. I mean, like, I have friends and family members who've tried vegan alternatives. Just when they go out to eat, right? But when it comes to the subject as well, like when it comes to these companies like that sell rice and beans and crops, when it comes to companies that sell crops, basically rice, beans, if a larger portion of their market becomes people over time, it gives them more incentive to cater to ethical vegans than it does the animal agriculture industry, which will take a long time to happen. Because unfortunately, the crop-based industry becomes the animal agriculture industry because the majority of crops go to animals, unfortunately. But I'm saying there's utility. I'm seeing that there are utility benefits to eating in a caloric surplus. Is all I'm saying.
I think I would agree with that.
And honestly, I think there are harms too. But yeah, it's like I think my original statement maybe was a bit too bold, but it was an idea that just came to mind.
Well, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just
I don't know whether
that
I'm right.
wasn't my intuition, is what I'm saying.
Like I just my intuition is like increasing the demand is absolutely wonderful, especially when like I drink more plant-based milk when I'm in a caloric surplus. That's great for plant-based milk alternatives. There are also some
Probably.
I eat some vegan meats when I'm in a caloric surplus. That's great. You know, so yeah. Anyways, but yeah, it's like sometimes maybe I'll have vegan protein powder. That's good.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting though, because Peter Singer, it doesn't provide any arguments really. He kind of just admits to it being worse, when it seems like, I guess Peter Singer is probably not like in the online debate sphere, I guess.
I mean,
he wouldn't really know, but
well, I mean, he doesn't have to be. Like, honestly, to be charitable, like, hate to say this, but you get dumber as you get older. And Peter Singer is kind of old, so like
True.
his intelligence might not be what it once was when he was younger. Like, as I'm getting older, you know, when I got up there into my later 20s, I definitely noticed a difference in my ability to process in comparison to when I was like 24.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, that's brutal. I thought 30-year-olds, like they're not.
No,
they're
I can
not
still intellectually process things really well. I just know, like, maybe I'm just intelligent enough, or maybe it's not intelligence. Maybe I'm just more psychologically aware of my own. Maybe I just have a greater sense of psychological awareness, self-awareness.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, because I'm thinking like it's one thing to be like dumber when you're like, when you're 60. Being dumber when you're 30, that's I don't think that's how it is.
Yeah, I believe at a certain age, like, your intelligence starts to decline. I think it's 25. I could be wrong.
I thought it was 30. And it goes down slowly. So
I think, yeah, it does go down slowly, but I've noticed a slow difference.
But let's see, what was I thinking? Oh yeah, Ben Feingold, my favorite chess player. I mean, he's like 50 something, and he said, hey, you can't be top 10 in the world in chess after you hit 50. Like, once you hit 50, it's over.
All right, you know what the black pillars say? It's over. I'm just memeing. It's an internet meme. Got it. I'm sorry. It's like someone on my server says it like that. I find it like so. I find it like as funny as I find someone being over the top silly. I'm gonna press play.
Yeah.
Going to affect both humans and non-humans. Also, the example that sometimes people give of cars producing roadkill. We also know that cars produce human kill. We know for a fact that if we were to lower the speed limit, less humans would die. But we sort of make this balance, like you say, we sort of have to figure out how to live. But we're sort of consistent in our treatment of humans and animals here. Like, I don't think people would justify eating a caloric surplus in order just to enjoy their body if it involved the killing and eating of unnecessarily of human beings.
Decreasing the speed limit and decreasing economic productivity would also have a huge utility decrease. That wasn't the best example. Like, I'm not. Maybe it was. I'm not sure about the point he's making.
Of course, I mean, cars emissions are often brought up, but I think that we're consistent in our treatment of animals and humans. We know that by driving cars, environmental pollution is going to affect both humans and non-humans. Also, the example that sometimes people give of cars producing roadkill. We also know that cars produce human kill. We know for a fact that if we were to lower the speed limit, less humans would die. But we sort of make this balance, like you say, we sort of have to figure out how to live. But we're sort of consistent in our treatment of humans and animals here. Like, I don't think people would justify eating a caloric surplus in order just to enjoy their body if it involved the killing and eating of unnecessarily of human beings. I just found it interesting how you said that, look, if somebody is intentionally eating food that kills animals that they don't need to eat to be healthy, but they're doing it because, they really enjoy having a six-pack or having large biceps, that maybe that's okay. That doesn't seem too different to me than saying, if somebody wants to eat animal products because they just really enjoy the taste of it or they really enjoy the way it feels or something like that, then I guess that's okay. I don't really see...
Well, that's another kind of flexibility that I'm prepared to tolerate. It's not one that I myself practice, but I think one of the original uses of the term flexitarian was by someone, I can't remember now who it was, who had this sort of exception for the Michelin 3-hat restaurant, something like that. So they were saying, yeah, I'm going to be a vegan most of my life, but if I'm ever in Paris and I get a chance to dine at a restaurant run by one of the best chefs in the world, and this restaurant doesn't cater for vegans, it's okay to eat there. I don't really object to that either, right? If this person is really avoiding.
Did I just see a smirk on Alex's face?
Yeah, I just ate, and now I have to eat again because I just threw up after what Peterson just said. Oh,
yeah, I think Alex just smirked. Let's see. Because I do know Alex is struggling with his past cope from his past post.
I'm going to have to drink my throw up. Damn.
Exactly.
At a restaurant run by one of the best chefs in the world, and this restaurant doesn't cater for vegans, it's okay to eat there.
Okay, no, never mind. He wasn't really smirking.
I don't really object to that either, right? If this person is really avoiding animal products the rest of their life, and just making this occasional exception, again, I just don't think it's the point of morality is not to be able to point your finger at somebody and say, hey, you're doing something wrong. The point is to think, am I living a life which on the whole makes the world a better place, reduces suffering, sets an example for other people to follow who will also make the world a better place? Or am I somebody who is just going along with whatever is convenient and not caring about the effect that it has on other sentient beings?
Yeah.
The reason why people point their fingers is because decisions can affect. Like, was that even a good? I gotta hear that again. What the fuck? Like, I hold on.
Oh, not again, no.
Well,
make the world a better place, and just making this occasional exception. Who had this sort of exception for the Michelin 3-hat restaurant, something like that. So they were saying, yeah, I'm going to be a vegan most of my life, but if I'm ever in Paris and I get a chance to dine at a restaurant run by one of the best chefs in the world, and this restaurant doesn't cater for vegans, it's okay to eat there. I don't really object to that either, right? If this person is really avoiding animal products the rest of their life, and just making this occasional exception. Again, I just don't think it's the point of morality is not to be able to point your finger at somebody and say, hey, you're doing something wrong. The point is to think, am I living a life which on the whole makes the world a better place, reduces suffering, sets an example for other people to follow who will also make the world a better place? Or am I somebody who is just going along with whatever is convenient and not caring about the effect that it has on other sentient beings?
I think Peter Singer is suffering from some cognitive dissonance.
Yeah. I mean, I thought of some creative things to say about how disgusted I am right now, but I can't say them on YouTube. Terrible.
I mean, like, I'm thinking, man, like when I hear stuff like that, I just want to knock someone's teeth out. I swear to God, like, oh, we need to think of how we can make the world a better place, not just think about how it benefits ourselves. Or like, what was the word that he used? Like, are we trying to think about how we're how are you setting a better example? How are you making making the world a better place? And what was he?
You're doing something wrong. The point is to think, am I living a life which on the whole makes the world a better place, reduces suffering, sets an example for other people to follow who will also make the world a better place? Or am I somebody who is just going along with whatever is convenient and not caring about the effect that it has on others?
I think I'm going to
whatever is convenient. Whatever is convenient. Like when he said, like going along with like Jesus in Christ, when he brings up like the flexitarianism, it to me like the way I perceive his perspectives, like some of it to me just sounds like he's basically making arguments for convenience, for what is for a more like he's setting up arguments that would justify a more easily he's setting up arguments to justify someone making decisions purely based off convenience. Like, how are you setting a good example if you're engaging in a behavior that anyone else can justify treating another group of another being? Like, somebody could easily say, well, I'm not black, so I believe I should be able to enslave all black people. An Asian person can say, who lives in an Asian country, that everyone coming into their country, like, someone could have a supremacist view religiously, ideologically, racially, and they could basically make the justification that no one else outside their in-group should have to experience this. It's like, to me, just everything he's saying, it just sounds like cognitive dissonance. Like, he's not really, like, what the, why do so many vegans say such nice things about this guy?
I guess because they're crazy. But But yeah, what was I saying? Oh yeah, I was just gonna steal who's the guy? 40-year-old vegan said. Yeah, like every time you play what he's saying here, like I'm losing B12. Like at this point, I'm gonna need like an injection in order to even survive. Like it's over for me. Like
Yeah,
oh my goodness.
the lack of the B12, man. Yeah, it's like this. Yeah, a lot of people worry about vegans dying. This is how vegans really die. They lose so much B12 after watching this video that they have to commit suicide rather than facing a painful death.
Oh my
And like this guy's supposed to be like a famous philosopher, and what he's espousing just sounds like nonsense. Like I talk with you, like there's so many other people who are not very educated in philosophy, who I honestly think are more respectable than this guy. Just listening to him, because the problem is like if your perception is like if your moral ethical perception is that we should respect, we shouldn't kill animals for the same reasons that we shouldn't kill humans, then why is it okay to do it occasionally? Then I could just say it's okay to do it humans occasionally. Well, then he could say, okay, well, we also know that realistically we won't apply the same reasoning to humans as animals. Okay, well, that's just speciesism. Then he could say, okay, well, it's a matter of how intelligent is this being. It's not speciesism. I would do to someone who's severely mentally disabled. Okay, would you really do that to someone severely mentally disabled? Would you be fine with organ harvesting someone who is innocent, who has no ability to defend himself, who's mentally disabled? Literally, you're creating an argument to exploit something that's innocent, that's incapable of defending themselves. Like,
I mean,
could you
that's
imagine?
what Alex just said.
Could
right?
you imagine the
Compared to
cruelty?
human
Like,
beings.
but could you like the cruelty that someone experiences to say something like that? But to what he was saying to Peter, to the bullets that Peter Singer was biting, like, holy Jesus, and whoa, like, yowza, like, holy shit, like,
He lives in Australia where guns are banned, so he probably can't get bullets anywhere else. You know, he's got to chomp down now while he can.
like I think the point of what I'm trying to say here is it's easy to say stuff like that, like, oh, I'd be fine with, treating some humans that way. Would you really? Like, no, would you really? Are you just saying that? Like, I think one of the conversations I had with in my Discord room is something that someone said to me was, it's easier for people to convince themselves of positions they don't really believe in, and it's questionable how much Peter Singer really believes in the position that he actually believes in. Like, does he even really believe what he's saying? Like, and here's like an even better perspective. Like, a racist could use that exact same like a very similar argument. The argument that it's not treated to our people this way, where it's that this same line of reasoning won't be applied to us. Or like a racist could easily say, well, it wouldn't be applied. This line of reasoning wouldn't be applied to our people or our in-group.
I don't know if he ever said anything like that.
No, but what I'm saying is, like, if you're like when he's arguing, like, I think he argued earlier that how we treat animals will not necessarily be applied the same way to humans.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then he brought up like intelligence. Like, that's how literally most racists or sexists, they'll bring up differences in traits to then justify a principle that would benefit one group drastically over the other. Like, what the fuck? What am I listening to? Like, why has anyone propped up this guy?
It's almost over. Let's just finish this up.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I must say that I remain unconvinced on a great many of the points that you've put forward here, but I'm glad that we had the opportunity to discuss them. Peter Singer, thank you so much for joining me again on the podcast.
Thanks, Alex. As always, it's been challenging and stimulating to talk to you, and I've enjoyed our discussion. And I hope the people who want to keep up with my current views will pick up Animal Liberation now and see what I have to say there.
Absolutely. The book will be linked in the descriptions wherever you're listening.
Right. And by the way, I'm not sure when you're going to air with this, but there's also I'm also doing a speaking tour. So it'd be great if you could link to the website of the speaking tour.
Absolutely, that will be done. Is that a global tour?
Well, it's United States, United Kingdom, just London, and a couple of cities in Australia.
That's around sort of June, July time, I think.
No, it's not July. It's more late May, June. Oh, actually yeah, you're right. The Australian ones are in July because I'm not back to Australia earlier than that. But yeah, so for the United States, it starts on the 26th of May. If you're going away before that, it would be great if you could link to that website.
No problem whatsoever. I'll make sure that everything that we've discussed is linked down below. And if people want to come and see you in person and presumably get a chance to ask questions of their own,
and further difficult questions, yes, that's right. You've been giving them practice on how to do so.
Yeah, an opportunity to do so. So if you're listening and you think that you have any thoughts, of course, leave a comment if you're listening on YouTube. But otherwise, here's an opportunity to ask Professor Singer yourself. Yeah, it's been a pleasure, and I'm sure people will enjoy this conversation.
I hope so. Thanks, Alex.
Maybe I can talk to this guy.
How did he say you could talk to him? I kind of just like tuned out.
Well, cage match. I would destroy Peter Singer in the cage match. Oh my goodness! And anyway, he's having a speaking tour, so he's like going around to different places. But he's not going to. He's going to the U.S. and the UK, but you know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll see if he comes near me. You think he'll go to Washington D.C.? Maybe I can go up there. Probably not.
I don't know, but like
probably only famous college.
I don't know, but like honestly, when I listen to this guy Peter, if you do record it, if you record it, I would love to put it on my channel. Please do.
Record me versus Peter Singer. I don't think I'm actually gonna get to talk to Peter Singer.
If you do. But yeah, like when it comes to the subject, right, of like Peter Singer and everything he said, I've said I did not enjoy that. Like to me, I enjoy. No, in a sense, I kind of enjoyed it. Like I enjoyed giving my critiques, but like I think what really bothers me is like I think Peter Singer doesn't really keep in mind like the practicality of supply and demand when he was talking about these hypotheticals, like the hypothetical of creating a demand for slaughter of animals, and like just entertaining the idea, like what that can lead to. Like imagine if someone entertained the idea, what if racism increased utility? Like I could say, okay, like we're going to be talking about this hypothetically, but keep in mind this doesn't apply to the real world. Practically it doesn't work out this way. Or if someone knew that was my position, but like when he's talking to a world that already views animals as commodities and he's not really keeping in mind supply and demand, when he's talking about bringing some animals into existence and being able to eat some of them, so the reason why it sounds so insane to me is like I can't even imagine this person. I don't see him as a vegan at that point. I see him as a flexit. I see him as like I see him as like I basically see him not much different than a vegetarian. It's okay to like basically kill and grape sometimes. You know, graping, you know, replace G with R. Graping is okay from time to time, you know, so long as they get to live a good life. It's like when you have that perspective and you create a demand for that in a market, what do you think would happen if the demand actually exceeded the ability to make that being live a good life? Do you think people would give up that pleasure, or do you think people would continue to purchase? Like it's so stupid. Like, and here, like, what if an economy collapsed and you have a bunch of people who are addicted to eating animal-based products? Do you think they're all going to start caring about animals, or do you think they're just going to eat plants, or do you think they're just going to keep eating animals because they're used to it? It's the normalization. Like, it is the very normalization of it that that can easily create an uphill battle under a less than ideal circumstance. The slippery slope exists under less than ideal circumstances. You want to say something, Chaddie?
Yeah. I was just gonna say, like, I was imagining talking to Peter Singer, and unfortunately, it seems like the area in which I agree with him is also like the entire area in which I'm educated. Like, certainly, I have the intuition that, like, some of the things that he thinks in the realm of practical ethics like are wrong. Like, I have different intuitions than him, but like I can't. I don't have any empirics for those, and that's how you would argue in places like that.
Hmm.
So
I think, like, honestly, I was, I feel a little heartbroken, seeing what I saw, listening to what I heard today. I feel heartbroken, yet I also feel like I exposed a fake. Like, I feel like this whole video basically just exposed a fake vegan. So, um, but at the same time, like, when I look at the vegan community, I look out and I feel disgust. I see people who argue for certain positions they don't really believe in. They'll argue that you should listen to people even if they upset you. Yet if you use a certain word that they don't approve of, like the R word, any offensive slur, anything that's offensive, even if it's like under context. Like, one person was getting angry because I used, like, the word with the N, the NA word.
the
The
sussy
black.
one.
No, that's the ER word. The NA word, that means,
I
like,
think
my
with an A,
brother.
it's still sussy, but
I mean, with all due respect, I think that's because a lot of people are out of touch with black culture. So
true,
some
true.
people would say, some black people would say no one should use that word, but black people, like, my experience from, like, black people from the USA, like, people who are not involved with politics, most of them they don't care if white, like, from my experience, they didn't care if white people say it, they didn't care if Hispanics say that, like, when like a Hispanic rapper uses the NA word, nobody cares, but it's a different connotation. It means, like, my brother, my people, but, like, which can also be
Fair
a
enough.
slur. But when you use the ER word, it is a most definite slur.
Yeah,
Um.
yeah.
So yeah. Basically, like, what I'm trying to say here is, like, even if you just try to, like, explain that to somebody, and if you use that word within, like, context, there are certain vegans that get outraged. There's fake vegans. There's people like Peter Singer. Um there's people who actually believe it's okay in certain circumstances to grape and murder. No different than a vegetarian. You know, it's no different that that murder and grape is okay from time to time. It's the
I
all these
slightly
people.
reduce it. It's okay. I only do it on Tuesdays and Fridays. So it's
Yeah,
okay.
only on the weekends. Only once a year on the weekend. Only if there's, like, an ideal chef in France, and they had no vegan
Oh
options,
my
and
god.
I can't pass this up. It's a top tier chef.
Oh my goodness.
It's like, I think
Yeah,
what
I mean,
disgusts me most about it is
I'm against rape, but oh,
no, it's great, great.
grape. I'm against grape, but if she's really hot, well then maybe I'll make an exception.
I'm against slavery, but, if that if that
Oh my
if
goodness.
that person of color is walking down the street and he's really strong, I might make an exception.
This guy's crazy. What's up with this guy?
Like, yeah, it's like, the fact is that there's nobody shaming this type of line of reasoning when people do this to animals. Like, in a hypothetical, if an animal became really intelligent and really sentient, and if it could, like, I want to finish my point about the vegan community, is, like, so many of them are disingenuous individuals that are advocates of their sensitivities. They don't believe in the principles they believe in. There's so many people that are just full of shit. They have cognitive dissonance, like Peter Singer. There's so many people, like, there's bad definitions. There's like terrible arguments. I feel like it's a landmine of bullshit. I feel like I'm swimming through the land. Like, I feel like I'm walking through the landmine of bullshit. It's everywhere. Chaddie, save me. I need you, Chaddie.
Yeah.
Save me, Chaddie. Save me. Save me.
Yeah. I mean, I can try.
But, like, you understand what I mean, right? Like, it's overwhelming. Do you feel like that sometimes?
No. No, I don't have feelings. I thought we already talked about this. I'm a sociopath. No feelings.
But the people who recognize this atrocity, they're all idiots. Hell, I
Well,
consider
but they're
myself
smarter
I
than
consider
normal.
myself less of an idiot. I'm mostly an idiot. And I'm less of an idiot. That's terrible. It's
Yeah, no, yeah. I
so
mean,
terrible. Oh, I'm
most
sad.
people are pretty
It's so
dumb.
sad. Oh, I should just title this HSD has a breakdown.
Yeah, maybe.
Vegan break.
Everyone who's intelligent is vegan, but only 1% of vegans are intelligent.
Am I intelligent?
Yeah, you're pretty. You're okay, HSD.
Like I feel like it's more like 5%. Like I feel like it's like 5% to 10% of vegans are like actually decently intelligent, and it's just it's gut sickening. It's overwhelming. It's like I feel sick thinking about everything they said today. Like if the animals for like 10 minutes, you could talk to an animal like a pig. If you gave him, if he had all of his memories, but you gave him the intelligence of a 25-year-old man, and if he could speak English, if he could talk to you, if let's just say he wouldn't even hurt you. Let's just say he'd talk to you. He would probably express such anger, rage, or maybe he'd shame you. Maybe he wouldn't care. Maybe he would say, "Hey man, I just wish I could kill your entire family and eat them all." Like if he was intelligent, articulate, if he had like our understanding of philosophy, if we gave him a bunch of knowledge, like if I was God and to snap my finger, I could easily imagine if I did that to like 1,000 pigs, and if one person who eats meat occasionally on the weekend, they murder and grape sometimes, like would that person feel the same way? Like, if they were being shamed, like we shame people for these terrible things like grape and murder. Like Jesus, like this is what like the radical incels say. Like, maybe if I really wanted to, maybe I would grape. Like.
Yeah, incels.
Like,
Oh,
and
but I
trying
like
to shape
radical.
the fuck up. No, yeah, like, like the insane incels. Like, obviously, radical incels are not good. Chaddie, you agree with that, right? Like the violent ones, they're not good, right?
Well, I'll say this: normal people are the worst.
No, Chaddie, like, just you're basically making it sound like you agree with someone who grapes. You're not saying that, right?
No, yeah.
Chaddie, like,
I'm
pay attention to what you're
100%
saying.
against grapes.
God damn, Chaddie.
I hate grapes. They're the worst thing ever.
Chaddie, you're gonna get me canceled one of these days. But when it does happen, we'll be laughing together. I don't care. But like honestly, like in all fairness, like try to articulate a way that people understand it. But like, dude. Well, the point I'm saying here is the animals are not here to shame us. For that reason, people engage in these behaviors sometimes, occasionally, who believe it's better to not eat animal products. And for that reason, like I find it so fucking disgusting that you can't actually value a principle itself, but instead what you like what that shows me about your character is that what you like it just shows me that you more or less will engage in despicable behavior that you yourself find less than ideal, morally speaking, generally, just because it's not shamed. It's so stupid.
Yeah, it's weak, is what it is. It's just pathetic. Yeah, Peter Singer's a weak guy. The cage match, me versus Peter. Oh my goodness, he isn't just weak emotionally and intellectually, but physically. Like it'd be over for him. Cage match. I'm stronger than him in every conceivable way.
Something I want to say is actually one time somebody did ask me like so like as I've been like exercising and gaining muscle, a while back somebody asked me what was I eating. How'd you look so good? You lost a bunch of fat, you got physically stronger. What you been eating, man? I love that feeling. That's why I work out is I want to look like a vegan and I want people to say, "Damn, boy, what you been eating?"
Yeah.
I'll be like, get rid of that beta male bitch animal based product shit.
Yeah,
that's what I want to say. Use beta bitch until you eat plant based. That's what I want to say.
It's true. Yeah.
That high carb diet, get that energy to make those gains. But like, in all fairness and seriousness, like I'm at a loss for words, and I don't even know what to say. Like it's so much, But yeah, I think I've said everything I've had to say. If there's any other closing statements I'd want to make, give me a second. Chaddie, do you have any closing statement?
Yeah, closing statement. I hate calculators.
That was it was short, but that was actually beautiful. For me, what I would want to say is I appreciated Cosmic Skeptic pushing him on this for the subject of devil's advocate, but when it comes to the subject of like Peter Singer's positions, um, I've already brought up the subject of give me a sec. Um, I think if there's anything else, which I kind of hinted at, was I think when Peter Singer said what he said, I think it's easy to say it when you have emotionally spaced yourself from the horrific reality of what is killing. And more importantly, when you have a higher rate of compassion just for a sentient being, like most people wouldn't want to grape a mentally disabled person for compassion. And hopefully one day we can get to there for animals. One of the nice things about really dumb vegans is they have the privilege of emotional sensitivity, and there is something that is valuable in it. Is that even if someone's not consistent, sometimes that emotional sensitivity is more important than being consistent. And I've talked about this with my slave owner hypothetical. But when we talk about Peter Singer, I get the feeling that his normative ethics and his reflecting upon sentient life, it can sometimes distract you from actually trying to emotionally connect to another being, which can be helpful for some people to better maybe help them understand the flaws of their own ethical system. And for some people, sometimes just simply like petting an animal and feeling some level of compassion for that animal can actually help someone better philosophically reflect than the best, most complex argument. I guess what I'm trying to say here is like if sometimes if you want to make someone go vegan, for anyone listening, sometimes the best thing to do is to advocate for someone to actually go to like a animal rescue, to pet a pig, or to try and create a relationship with an animal that would be slaughtered. And I think it's a lot easier to say that when they're so distant away from the average Joe. And there's a power of that intuition when rationalized sometimes can bring us to some of the most what I would go so far as say most dignified philosophical conclusion, no, dignified ideal circumstances. It can actually create a superior moral system is what I'm trying to say. Not all the time, but Chaddie, that was it. Any other thing you want to say? Because I think that's the last thing I want to say is it's easy to say this shit when it's an animal, it's not your niece or nephew. Or your child. It's easy to condemn someone else that you don't know, or someone else that usually isn't in your in-group. Yo, Chaddie, you there? Chaddie?
Yeah. I don't know if I misunderstood you, right? But it sounded like you were saying dumb people can make a better moral system. I definitely don't agree with that.
No, I'm saying, like, for example, a dumb vegan who's really emotionally sensitive might be better than an omnivore who's really intelligent, who has like 150 IQ,
Oh,
like
yeah.
a 100
Yeah,
IQ vegan. Yeah,
Sure.
so it's more nuanced. I'm saying like sometimes having that emotional sensitivity and not having yourself so emotionally spaced is more important than actually having the most complex philosophical, in-depth, detailed philosophical argument, or to be extremely philosophically educated.
Being right is better than being smart.
Yes, that's essentially how you can boil it down.
But smart people are more often right.
Yes,
I think.
but not always. And
I
sometimes
suppose that's true.
being really smart can also having like a large amount of being gifted intellectually can sometimes distance yourself emotionally from other beings, and that can also be a downfall.
But HSD, you think that that's
A
my
lot of times.
downfall? I'm too smart.
That's why I'm a sociopath.
Well, yeah, but not real. I mean,
What do you think it is?
I don't know. Not really. For you, it's more so like the environment that you live in and the amount of apathy. But like away from like you and your utilitarianism, I'm just saying like when I think about Peter Singer, that's the only thing I didn't bring up, or at least the only thing I think came when I really thought about it, when I thought about it in depthly. I can't help but feel like there's two more things.
I think that, well, when I was saying I was a sociopath, that doesn't have anything to. Well, okay, it does partially have something to do with me being a utilitarian, but that's still like totally different things.
It does also make me. I guess the last thing is it does make me wonder if Peter Singer has actually it does make me wonder how much does Peter Singer actually reflect upon his own decisions and his own philosophical positions, or sometimes when I listen to him, I feel like it brings into question how much critical thought we bring up for philosophers. And I think like Thomas Sowell said something very similar, but I'm going to readjust one of his things. Like when we have bad philosophers or philosophers with lots of bad ideas, I think sometimes it says more about us as a society than it does them. That we're willing to prop up some terrible idea from some person. Sorry, we're willing. No. That's the wrong way. We're willing to prop like no. When there's philosophers with bad ideas, and when they're no, he has a lot of good ideas too, but
I think in terms
I
of
guess
philosophy, Peter Singer's right about everything. It's just the practical stuff, he's crazy. But
yeah, I guess maybe that's one way to put it. But
also, I think Peter Singer just goes totally against everything we have as a society. Like, I mean, he said, what did he say? Oh, he said like killing infants is fine. Like he said that. Like I mean.
Yeah, but Chaddie,
So
I think
I don't think that.
I think yeah, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, well, sometimes when people have bad ideas, and depending on how much they're propped up by society, I think sometimes it says more about us as a society than it does about them. So I think like maybe a lesson for the audience is sometimes maybe it's good to think critically about the people that you philosophically tend to promote and believe in. And yes, this includes me. Once again, I don't have anything against anyone who actually promotes animal liberation. If the arguments are good, if it's a good book, I think that's good stuff. But it's okay to like, and don't get me wrong, you're not going to agree with everyone on everything, but it does make me wonder, it does make me wonder what is the threshold to be a more like, what does the threshold mean to be a moral philosopher nowadays? I sometimes feel like all it is just popularity or just attention.
No, a moral philosopher is just someone who thinks about morality. Like, I mean,
yeah, but like but
popularity has nothing to do with it. Like, even if
think
no one knows who you are, you'd still be a moral philosopher.
I think like to be like I'm saying what I'm trying to say here is I feel like people might pay attention to the popularity of a philosophy rather than someone might pay more attention to the popularity of a philosopher rather than their someone might pay more attention to the popularity of a philosopher more than how right or wrong he is. Like for example, someone might consider Jordan B. Peterson a philosopher, and he has his own philosophy, right? But a lot of his philosophy is stupid. A lot of his takes are like dumb.
Jordan Peterson's insane.
Yes, yeah, but so I think what I'm trying to say here is like I think this says a bit about us as a society, and I think like I find it sad that I find it sad that it's hard to market good ideas. And sometimes, like, realistically, the marketing of your ideas matter more than your ideas, and it hurts. What do you want to say, Chaddie?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. The first one was when you said people pay more attention to the popularity of philosophy. I just thought of this time Bryn did something crazy to me. I don't remember exactly what it was. But he was like, he was saying utilitarianism is bad because it's unpopular, and then he showed a poll where it was like 28% of philosophers believe in utilitarianism, but 31% believes in virtue theory or something. And so it's like virtue theory is actually better. Insane, but
if all philosophers in like the world were like Nazis, and if 99% of philosophers were Nazis,
yeah, crazy. What was the other thing? I don't remember. Oh, whatever. Maybe I should go to bed.
yeah, I think we're done tonight. I think we've said everything we've had to say. Maybe I should have ended it sooner, but hopefully maybe people have some take homes from this, and maybe I gave some solutions. And I think I guess what I wanted to say was maybe we should be looking at the our philosophers' practical implications when we actually like to try and maybe we should also look at the practical implication as well to their normative ethics and like and then well, on the subject of like philosophers that deal with ethics, and then on top of that, maybe it's also good to seek out critical ideas and not just go with ideas that are inherently popular, or seek out new different ideas rather than just go with ideas that are popular. Is what I'm saying. Then see if those new ideas are better.
Yeah, be
Maybe
the
that's
Chad bullet biter as opposed to the virgin bullet avoider. That's what it is.
All right, everyone. So Canada has a censorship bill. So like, comment, share, subscribe.
God, I hate you.
Share hit the notification bell. But most importantly, this is History Shay's Disciple, and I'm asking you to improve your mind, your body, but most importantly, your soul, your spirit. So that being said, have an amazing 24 hours. I heard